Thank you. Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the latest meeting of the Western Area Planning Committee. My name is Councillor Adrian Abbs, and I'll be chairing this event this evening. Members of the committee joining me this evening are Councillor Anthony Amiraja, Councillor Phil Barnett, Councillor Dennis Bennyworth, Councillor Heather Codling, Councillor Caroline Culver, Councillor Tony Vickers, Councillor Howard Wollaston, and Vice Chairman Councillor Clive Hooker. The following officers are attending and will be advising us on various applications this evening. On my right, I have Bob Dray, Acting Development Control Manager. Sharon Armour, the Principal Lawyer, Planning and Governance, is on my left. Paul Goddard, our Team Leader for Highways Development Control, is on my left. Cheyenne Kirby, Senior Planning Officer, is over there at the back. Sian Kutz is another Senior Planning Officer, also there at the back, in the cheap seats or something like that. Erica Mayer, Senior Scientific Officer, good evening. Jess Bayliss is our clerk this evening. She's over here on my left. And our host this evening, or Zoom host this evening, is Gordon Oliver, who's sitting at the back here, controlling all the bits. Did I miss one? I'm so apologise. Thank you very much, Bob. I miss Catherine Island, of course. She's also there. That's why I couldn't see you. Thank you. Before we start this evening's meeting, I'd like to take the opportunity to remind members that we are subject to the Council's Code of Conduct, which requires us to uphold certain standards, including, importantly, respect. Members across the chamber may not always agree with one another, but I would ask that in our disagreements, we endeavour to always be respectful of other views. If we hear the evacuation alarm this evening, we must leave the building immediately. Please proceed via this safe emergency exit route, and please follow any instructions given by the officers. The assembly point is the car park of the Dolphin Pub. If the lockdown alarm sounds, we will remain seated and await instructions from officers. We will adjourn the meeting until such time as it is safe to proceed. Do members have any questions about the way in which this evening's meeting will be conducted before we proceed? I imagine not, because we've done this a bunch of times before. So first item on the agenda is apologies. Do we have any apologies this evening, Jessica?
Yes, Chairman. So I've received apologies from Councillor Patrick Clark, and Councillor Anthony Amiraja is in attendance as his substitute. Thank you.
Okay, second item on the agenda is minutes. I'd like to invite members to consider the minutes of the meeting held on 19th of July 2023. Would anybody like to? Yes, Councillor Vickers.
Thank you, Chairman. There is an important correction I'd like to be made, reflecting wrongly what I said. Page 10, first bullet. It says, however, G, it should of course be he, that's not the point. However, he had met the leaders of the Owners Association and informed them he would speak in support of the application. I did not inform them I would speak in support of the application. I said I would speak in their support against the application. So that's what it should say. It's got completely the wrong way around in there. Okay. Thank you.
That will be subject to the video recording, so we can confirm that without any problems at all. So
yeah, and I think, to be honest, we probably would have realised if it had been the way it's written in the minutes, because I think our heads might have gone up. So yeah.
Okay. So can I have a proposer for the minutes unless we have any more amendments? Thank you, Clive. Seconder, please. Heather Codling. All those in favour? Okay. Where are they? Bear with me one moment, please. I think it's the last page. Yeah. Yes, there you go. Thank you very much. Okay, moving on to item 3. Are there any declarations of interest this evening? Councillor Culver.
Thank you, Chairman. Items number 2 and number 4 are from my ward. And in my capacity as Chairman of Scrutiny, I was contacted about item 3. I have no pecuniary interest in any of the applications tonight, and I'll make my decision based on the evidence and the subsequent debate. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? Councillor Wollaston.
Yeah, item 3 is obviously within my ward. I have been lobbied by residents. Council members will know that I oppose this original application, but clearly that's now passed. This is just down to conditions, so I don't think I have a conflict of interest.
Okay. Councillor Benetheth.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, item 1 is in my ward. I was at a meeting of Hungerford Town Council when it was discussed at a planning meeting, but I will be looking at this afresh and have no preconceived ideas.
Lovely. Anybody else? I declare interest myself. Then I've been lobbied on items 3 and 4 by various members of the public. But none of them are in my ward, so that's fine. Okay, so next we're going to move on to the substantive part of this evening, and we're going to start with the Institute of Animal Health in Compton. No, I'm not. That's not the first one. Oh, we have switched them around. Yes, I decided not to in the end. Okay. Is that going to muck things up for the presentations? No. Okay, so we'll go back. Sorry, bear with me 1 second. I partly intended to move one of these agenda items around, but I'm not doing that now. So first one is on this evening is Norgate House. Okay, are we all in sync? Okay, and we're going to start with the officers' presentations. But before we do that, can I just do a quick summary for everybody that's here on how it's going to work? We're first of all going to have a presentation from the officers to give us some idea about what the application is. We will then go through the various parties that are sat over there. So whether it be the applicant, the agent, objectors, supporters, ward members, parish ward members, and so on and so forth. There is a maximum of 5 minutes each. So if you are intending in any capacity to have multiple people speak, please understand you only have 5 minutes. Sharon will be keeping the timer going and keeping us in order. After we have completed, after each speaker presents for 5 minutes, members will have the opportunity to ask further questions on what you have presented to us within that 5 minutes. We will only be able to ask questions about what you present, nothing else. Okay. Once we've completed all the various people presenting, members will then have an opportunity to ask officers for clarification on anything that's happened. We will then go into debate and normally we'll then vote on it one way or the other in terms of approval or not. So with all that said and done, let's start with the first one this evening, the 23/01650/full Norgate House officer. Which officer is presenting this, please? Cheyenne, if you'd over to you, please.
Thank you very much, Chairman. This application seeks planning permission for a change of use of office building, Class E use, to educational use, which is Class F1A, with minor external alterations and associated works to curtilage, including provision of outdoor amenity space and erection of fencing. This application has been called in by the Development Control Manager due to public interest. It's received no representations, and the officer recommendation is to grant planning permission. The application site is an office building located within the settlement boundary of Hungerford, within the North Wessex Downs AONB, and within the Charnham Park Protected Employment Area. The application site is also located to the west of the River Kennet and its tributaries. The site is accessed from Charnham Park, which serves other commercial units. To the southwest of the application site is Heronsgate Leisure Centre. The proposed change of use is for a state-funded independent school for children with special educational needs. This will accommodate for up to 30 pupils between the ages of 5 to 16, as well as provide up to 30 educational jobs due to the one-to-one basis of the teaching. Minor alterations to the building include a new ground floor door to the rear elevation, internal alterations, 2-meter high boundary fence, and changes to the car parking to provide outdoor play learning area, as well as a turning area for minibuses. A separate application has been submitted for the insertion of 8 roof lights. Since this application, the roof light application was approved on the 21st of August. So they're shown on the plans and refer to a separate planning application that was submitted and determined. There will be 46 parking spaces, which the highways officer has considered acceptable, along with 4 cycle spaces and 2 motorcycle spaces. No changes to the access. However, a drop-off area for the children is to be provided to the rear parking area. Both drop-off and pick-up times will be managed by a warden, and start and finish times will be staggered in order to minimise issues with traffic. Due to the nature of the school, most children will arrive by private transfer, either that's minibus, taxi, or parents. The plan on the ground floor plan shows on the screen, just shows the internal changes, as well as the proposed new exterior door. There'll also be classrooms on the first floor, and there is a staff room office on the second floor. This also shows the roof lights, which have now been approved. The only external change other than the roof lights, which are not subject to this application, is on the rear elevation, where there was a rear window. This has been converted to a door. This is the northwest elevation. As you can see from the image, the boundary fence has already been constructed, which was seen on the committee site visit. However, this would be considered permitted development, given its height and its setback from the road. The internal changes themselves do not require planning permission because they're internal works, and because the intention is for the school to open this September. The rush of this has been due to the substantial need proven for special educational places, not only in West Berkshire, but also other local authorities. The image on site will show the existing car parking layouts. However, this is to be converted to the outdoor play space. And so further works will be carried out to remove the hard standing to provide a more suitable area for children. This is the image of the car park, which will remain once the containers have been removed for current building works. 2 car parking spaces will be removed in order to provide a suitable turning space for minibuses. This is the rear elevation, where the proposed window at ground floor level will be changed to a door to provide, with this area provided as an additional outdoor play space. In front of the fencing, between the fencing and the road, will be additional landscaping, including shrubs and trees, etc. This image is for the rear southeast elevation. No changes are proposed other than access with some hard landscaping in order to improve the access round the outdoor play space. Since the update sheet has gone out, I have received correspondence from planning policy regarding the protected employment area. B1 use, which was previously considered under policy CS9, now falls under class E, which covers a wide range of commercial business service use. However, the educational use is not considered within this new use class. And under the new local plan review, they do want to safeguard existing employment sites. However, under the planning balance, we've deemed that the need for special educational need is much higher and much greater than the provision of the office building. So this was part of the planning balance. There's also a fallback position, which is due to the submission of a certificate of lawfulness. This is to allow the change of use of the building for 2 academic years. This would be granted by the council, providing that approval from the Secretary of State was received. However, we currently haven't received this, hence why this full application was submitted. But if Secretary of State approval was granted, it provides a backup option for the school. CS 15 is not a consideration in this case because it's for a change of use, and CS 15 for sustainable development is for new development, and this is for a change of use of an existing building. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Okay, I guess we'll move on to the speakers, and I have James Cole joining us, Councillor James Cole joining us from Hungerford by Zoom, I believe. Is that correct? Right.
Evening, Chairman. Can you hear me yet?
Yeah, I can hear you now. Thank you.
Might even be able to see me.
Yeah. Very good. You know how this works, James. So I'll give you a warning after 4 minutes. I don't know if you're going to need all the time, but don't feel it's a target.
I can assure you, Chairman, that I am not going to need 4 minutes, let alone 5.
Fantastic. I'll over to you then.
Evening, members. Good to see you all again. Apologies for not turning up in person this time, but reasons include the fact that we now think the decision on this one's pretty obvious. This came up first as a Cert P, done in a hurry without any warning to the town council. This did raise a lot of questions. The fast tracking of this full application raises general policy issues, but these are not really for this evening as far as we're concerned. Now, however, 2 of my colleagues have had a session with the promoters of this application. They are happy with what they heard. This is not a standard school. Rather than on foot, the children will arrive by minibus or car, and in our view, the roads can take the traffic. We know the swept path analysis has been done. We're told that start and finish times will be staggered. Yes, the site's an industrial area, but to us, the fencing to protect the children appears acceptable from what we've seen. We leave it to you to agree otherwise detail. Externally, the site's not going to look any worse, but reference was made at the site visit to some planting. That'll do some good, and I've heard it confirmed this evening. Even if it does prove to be just a short-term solution, we think it's a good use of an otherwise empty building and good to have such a school in Hungerford. We would be happy to see members vote this one through. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Just pause there. Do any members have any questions of Councillor Cole? Lot of shaking heads. So, yep. Thank you very much for coming along and filling us in. All right, next, it would normally be objectors and then supporters, but I don't appear to have any unless I'm somehow misinformed. Nope. So over, I believe, Mr. James Illness from Homes England. Hills, I'm sorry. It's, oh, that's the wrong one. No, it is the wrong one, sorry. From Homes England is here, is that right? Yeah. Hang on, I'm sorry, I'm doing the wrong one. It's because it's back to front, isn't it? But which one? Not doing the comments one. What am I doing? That's what I just said, from Provision. Sorry, on mine, it said you were from somewhere else, so yeah. Great. So 5 minutes, you get a minute's warning before the end. Over to you. Just the button.
Right.
You got it?
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Thank you, Alan.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening. I am the planning agent, James Isles from Provision, joined by Peter Berkshire, the founder of the proposed school here tonight. I am pleased to have been able to work closely with your planning officers, and we are very grateful for their assistance in bringing this proposal before you in such a timely manner this evening. As you've heard from your officer's presentation, the proposal was to open a much needed special education needs school in Hungerford, located in a fully refurbished empty office block. As I'm sure you're aware, there is an acute need for these specialised school spaces in the district. The proposal would see around 30 local pupil places being offered, serving a catchment of approximately half an hour's travel time, meeting the demand of West Berkshire and the immediate neighbouring area. Teaching in the school would be on a one-to-one basis and in very small group sizes. The applicant has worked hard to find a suitable location and available location in West Berkshire and has recently secured an ideal opportunity here at Norgate House. The aim is to open the school in September to meet pupil demand and to support local authority placements as soon as possible. Various but modest modifications to the property are involved. In summary, these include the new security fence in subtle green wire mesh, provision of outdoor play areas, a new doorway providing access to the play space, roof lights for the school offices, new native hedge planting at the street front, as we've heard, to complement surrounding character. There'll be space dedicated in the parking area to allow for minibuses to turn around, and motor and cycle parking spaces will be provided as requested by highways. There have been no objections to the proposal, and we are grateful for the prompt responses from consultees, including Hungerford Town Council. Where further information has been requested, we've provided it. We've clarified that additional facilities and play space will be accessed at the nearby Heronsgate Club. We've demonstrated compliance with the tree officer's guidance on the new fencing, so it minimises impact on tree roots. We'll include water butts to help with rainwater recycling and drainage. And we will be happy to provide electric vehicle charging points, and we'll be happy to accept the planning condition in that respect. In addition to helping with the special needs education, there will of course be economic benefits by generating a significant number of teaching, support, admin jobs, as well as supporting local companies through grounds maintenance, uniform providers, use of local food and drinks, facilities, and partnership working with Heronsgate Club and other local organisations. So in conclusion, we propose to reopen this empty office block in September, creating a great school for local children with dedicated special needs teaching that is desperately needed. The head teacher and the management team will work closely with other schools to improve standards and outcomes for children, and creating more opportunities for staff, for the local authorities involved, and other key stakeholders. We trust that you can support your officer's recommendation for approval. Thanks for your consideration.
Thank you very much indeed. Members, any question? Yeah, Councillor Barnett.
Thank you, Chairman. Mr. Isles, one thing which we noticed when we were going around the building the other morning was the fire escape. That's quite prominent on the footpath at the rear. It looks very rusty to me. Is there a possibility of having it yellow and black painted? And also, is there a possibility of having some lights? I'm just thinking, it's not technically.
Sorry, Councillor Barnett, but I'm not sure he mentioned any of this.
He did, he was talking, Chairman,
in terms of
talking about the play areas.
And you're talking about the fire escape there?
Yeah, the fire escape, yeah.
Oh, okay, I'll leave it for the moment.
Can I continue?
Yes, of course.
My concern was in relationship to obviously access of the pupils, perhaps running and not walking. Is there a possibility of having some area, perhaps wire around it or some petition so that they can't run along that section?
Okay, thank you, Councillor. In short, I'm sure there is. These things tend to get picked up by building regulations. Obviously, as a school, it goes through offset inspection as well. So I'm sure these things will be picked up. I can't imagine they will be missed. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other members? No, well, thank you very much for your presentation. So, I have 3 ward members. I believe councillor Vickers wishes to speak on this. So
Chairman, can I speak from here or should I go up to the?
I'll refer you at the lectern if
Okay,
that's all
right.
right.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, I haven't got a lot to say, but touching on something that councillor Cole mentioned from Hungerford Town Council and also mentioned it when I came to their town council meeting, planning committee meeting the other day, is the fact that this was really only called in or would have been called in by ward members. Councillor Gaines and myself saw this on the list and thought, hang on, why are we having a school in an employment area? You know, schools, children walk into, you know, through office blocks, etc. But there was so little detail on the application that we thought, well, we better call it in. You know, otherwise we'll miss our chance after a month. In fact, Mr. Dre beat us to it out of public interest. It was called in by him. But I just thought the issue of fast tracking applications needed to be covered in general terms, but raised under this, you know, this is what's triggered me to think about it as the portfolio holder as well as the ward member. I do think it's perfectly justified where there is a wider interest for the council as the council that it should be possible for officers to fast track. And I'm really glad this has come to the meeting, but it also highlights the fact that once an item's been called in, you can't uncall it in, certainly not as members. So I'm very happy with this application. You know, in a sense, with a 1-to-1 teaching ratio of a school like this, is quite a significant employment. I mean, things like the landscaping would have been done if it had remained an office building. But I think it's absolutely right that planning policy don't raise an objection. They pointed out that it's technically not an employment class use, but I think we've got to look at each on its merits. And as ward member, I'm very happy. And I think my colleagues are as well on this. Thank you, Chairman.
Yeah, thanks very much. Members, any questions of councillor Vickers? Thank you very much. Okay, we're now going to enter a phase where we're going to get members have an opportunity of clarification from the officers. So does any member need any clarification? Councillor Codling.
Yes, have officers requested any solar panels or any additional environmental points like that? We're talking about putting in electric charging, but I wouldn't have thought it would have hurt to have requested that on the building as well.
Thank you very much, councillor. Unfortunately, we can't request that under policy CS 15, which requires BREEAM and items like that. That's for new development. Whereas because this is change of use, we can't require that. It's up to the applicant whether they want to provide further solar panels, or it's in their interest if they want to provide that. But unfortunately, we can't ask for that, I'm afraid.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. I just have 2 clarifications to ask from the officers. Number one is in page 41, the consultation section, the highways have given conditional approval. What are those conditions? Are there any specific conditions we should be aware for this decision meeting?
Thank you. Thank you, councillor. They are the ones specified within the conditions. So it would be parking in accordance with the plans, electric vehicle charging point, which has now been added and accepted by the applicant, and the motorcycle and cycle provision spaces.
Okay, thank you. Number 2 would be quick one. You mentioned about the permission is granted by the Class C section, and it says it's up to 2 academic years. What's the risk of not extending this permission for after 2 years, and do we have mitigations for that?
So this current permission is for longer than 2 years. It's for the certificate of lawfulness is for just 2 academic years, because that's the guidance that's set out in the general in the GPDO. So they can only have 2 years under permitted development. However, they can come in for as long as they like in terms of the planning application. So there's no limit on the planning application.
So there's no risk after 2 years. They, yeah.
Councillor Culver.
Thank you, Chairman. Ms Kirby, I was just wondering, do we know how long the office block's been empty for?
Unfortunately, I don't know that. I think the previous occupant was David Wilson Homes, and I know they've moved further round the corner in Charnham Industrial Estate, but unfortunately, I don't know. I'd have to contact business rates or something.
Thank you.
Any other members? Councillor Bennyworth.
Thank you, Chairman. A question, please, to Mr. Dre. Good evening, Mr. Dre. Thank you very much for calling this before us this evening. Can you just tell me what the public interest was? Was it a perceived public interest or?
The Chairman,
Can you expand on that?
yeah, sure. The reason was obviously the school's keen to open in September. They originally tried to explore their permitted development rights, as has been explained, but without the Secretary of State approval from that, we couldn't progress that. So the application therefore came in at pace. As you appreciate, with various in the planning process, there's various ways it can come to committee from call-ins or objections. And given the committee cycles, if we didn't take it to this committee, then it would miss the September. So we basically took it to committee in order to avoid that risk. That's essentially it.
That's very kind. Thank you very much.
Thank you. If no other members have a question, I do have one for Mr. Goddard myself, please. On the site visit, the turnaround area hadn't been started. And there was still a door missing in one of the walls. And I keep hearing, well, the question to you is, what check are we going to do that it's actually done properly, considering that work was started and we're effectively doing retrospective here on some elements of it? How sure are you that the work will be done to your satisfaction? How will we check?
Chairman, I'm assuming you're referring to the turning area for the minibus.
Yes. The sound. Oh, right. Well,
yeah, we have had a swept path analysis issued. They have submitted drawings showing the minibus is able to turn within the site, and 2 of the car parking spaces have been set aside to enable that minibus to turn. The committee report does say 46 spaces, but there has been a slight reduction in order to enable that minibus to turn within the site.
okay, so what I'm trying to get at, is it conditioned that this occupancy shan't start, teaching shan't start until the works are completed? Or is it just, yes, we did our analysis and if they do it, it'd be okay?
Condition 3 says the development shall not be brought into use.
That's fine.
Yeah.
Thank
you. Yeah,
as long as we've caught that. So I do have one other question of Cheyenne. Given that some of that work is not instant and September's been mentioned a few times, are we running foul of anything that we need to worry about in terms of saying it will be delivered? We've done all this rush to get it done by September. The good chance they won't make September from what we saw on the site visit. Does that pose any issues?
I don't believe there's any concerns there. Some of the works are quite minor. I would assume changing a window to a door might not take that long, but I'm not a builder. So I would think most of the works internally have been carried out. It would be the play area, etc. But whether they're opening end of September or beginning of September.
Yes, nobody's actually said, have they?
So I would.
Sorry, Bob.
Yeah,
you want
Chairman, I think obviously our interest is in terms of the planning permission and whether the conditions are going to be complied with, and it's going to be in accordance with the plans. The triggers are clear about that they must be brought into the vehicle parking, etc., must be brought into play before it's brought into use. It's up to the applicant to comply with that, and obviously it's an enforcement issue if not. So as far as we're concerned, we've got the security in the conditions, and I would note that where more details are required, we've on the electric charging points, we've given 4 months as well. So the ones that to be complied with, there's no requirement to submit anything more now before they proceed. We've got that information. So the permission's sound in that respect, as we've recommended, and it's up for the applicant to progress it.
Lovely, thank you very much. Unless there are any other questions, we'll go straight into debate then. Who'd like to kick us off? Councillor Vickers.
Yes, Chairman, it's a really interesting one. This, I mean, it's simple in some ways, but clearly the key issue was the change of use. And I think that's what was a red flag in my eyes when I saw this. What, a school in a business park area? And actually, it's not the first time we've had this. The Newbury Business Park, I think we've had one of the office blocks converted to some sort of educational establishment there. And where you've got some education under pressure, and education is a local government function, I do think it's right that we work proactively. And indeed, the NPPF says that planning authorities should be proactive to support sustainable development, which has, a public interest. Yes, we do have to be careful that we don't allow untoward works to be carried out, without planning consent. But a lot of what we saw on site at the site visit could have been done under permitted development. The Cert P meant that any work was, in a sense, at the applicant's risk, because had this failed to get consent, then they'd have done quite a lot of work, which would have been not much use to them beyond 2 years. But I think everybody's acted very sensibly here, and I hope, members, that we support what's happened so far, sort of out beyond, sort of behind the radar, as it were, with officers and educational specialists. I was lucky to attend, although I was not the target of the address by the chair of the trustees, the background to how this whole development came about. And I think it's something that we should support, and it will be, I think, acceptable. The only slight comment I have, and again, it's not something we can insist of, I would like to see, before the hedging, the landscaping is mature at that front elevation on Tealgate, I'd like to see some sort of barrier to view put up in front of that playground, because it will take a few years for hedging to actually obscure, screen the children playing from view. But I think we will go away and look at the general issue of fast tracking, but in this case, it needed to be fast tracked, and I think it's all good news. And if they can't begin their term bang on date, well, that's not a planning matter. That's between them and Ofsted and the education authorities. Thank you, Chairman.
So I'm going to come to you next, Anthony, but what I'd like to say, normally I'd want a little bit of debate before taking taking a recommendation. In this case, I'm getting the sense that we're probably all aligned anyway. So feel free to make a recommendation. And then, so Anthony first, then yourself, Dennis.
Thank you, Chair. I would like to echo Councillor Vickers' sentiments, especially considering this school will take some pressure off the special needs school, the Castle School in my ward. It's under tremendous pressure to offer places, and considering the other schools, primary schools, one among St. Joseph, which I'm a governor of, having a lot of pressure, having sent children in the special needs criteria. So I support this school and support this for starting early as September and take the pressure off. Only that this is not in Newbury, but I think this will take children, give places to children from the neighboring villages and towns. So it will be good for them. So I support this.
Are you supporting, or are you making a motion to accept officer recommendation?
I'm supporting in general. So
okay, Dennis, over to you.
Chairman, if you're happy for me to do so. To be a bit of background, when this first came before Hungerford Town Council's planning committee, it set a few hairs running. The details were thin on the ground, and on paper initially it looked a challenging one. As the information's come down, it's found great favour with the Town Council, and I echo again the words of Councillor Vickers. I think it's something that will sit very nicely. I regret the loss of of industrial space, but in this case, it can't be avoided. And to that end, Chairman, I'd like to propose acceptance of officer's recommendation.
Okay, thank you. Do I have a seconder for that? Councillor Codling. Before we do it, are there any conditions that anybody really were thinking about that they'd like to try and add? Councillor Culver.
Do we need to add what councillor Vickers said about a screen in lieu of the bushes and trees until they've grown up?
Over to you, Bob.
Yeah, Chairman, landscaping is a relevant planning consideration, so you shouldn't put on a planning condition unless you think it's necessary to grant permission. But if you think there is planning grounds to put on landscaping, hedgerows or fencing, then that is within your gift. If you do that, it would be a case of we would need details, presumably. So I would suggest that we worded it in a similar way to the other one where we're looking for information, say within, I think we said 4 months. Yeah, but you should identify that it's necessary to put a condition on first. Thank you.
Do you want to read back what that might sound like for Councillor Vickers to say yay or nay to? Oh, not to Councillor Benefits to say yay or nay to, sorry.
Are you thinking of soft landscaping planting or hard landscaping like a fence?
And I was just thinking of something temporary. You often see this. I know up at Greenham Common, where you've got rows and rows of cars being stored. They put a green screen over the fence just so that they're obscured from view. That's not the same reason, it's just to preserve the sort of pleasant environment of Greenham Common, that you don't go to Greenham Common to look at rows of cars being stored. But I just thought from the point of view of the privacy of children playing in this case, until the landscaping has grown.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for the clarification. Chairman, I'd ask that you obviously delegate to us to go away and come out with the precise wording, but it would say something along the lines of within 4 months of occupation, details of the boundary treatments shall be submitted to and approved in writing by the local planning authority, and thereafter provided within presumably I think we go for 1 month. We may, if we can discuss that with the applicant, if you're not precious about the precise timings, but something along that wording, and the reason would be for privacy. Thank you.
Happy to accept that, Chairman.
Okay, let's go to a vote then. All those in favour? I'm pretty sure that's unanimous. Thank you very much, everybody. All right, so we're going to move on to the second item, which, depending on which bit of paper you're looking at, is the first item. But anyway, it's the discharge of conditions at Compton, I believe. So officer this time is Cheyenne again. Oh, over to you.
Thank you very much, Chairman. This item seeks the approval of information for several conditions associated with the development that is approved on the former Purbright site, and particularly related to the demolition phases. Members, it's important that your officers clarify that development has planning permission on the site, and these are just for specific details for the discharge of conditions. So the application was the original application 20-01336 Outmatch for hybrid planning permission was determined at Planning Committee on the 23rd of February this year. The application is split into a full and outline application. The full application was for demolition of all but 3 buildings, remediation of land contamination and preliminary groundworks, change of use of land, including public open space and wildlife areas. The outline application was for up to 160 dwellings, land for employment use, including that existing and an area for future employment use. Access was for consideration with all other matters reserved, which are landscaping, scale, layout and appearance, which includes housing mix. This application seeks discharge of conditions 16, 17, 18A, 18B, B to D, 19, 20 and 21 of this previous permission. This was called in by a ward member. In total, we've had 2 objections and the officer recommendation is for approval. Due to the these applications have been submitted separately, they'll have different numbers, but we'll go through them as one, just to clarify. This is the location of the wider site at Compton. And this is the approved land use parameter plan as part of the 20 application. This is also an illustrative layout. So it's to provide background on the application for those members who were not here when we had the previous application. This is just indicative of what it could look like. None of this has actually been set, but it's just to give members an idea. The first condition was condition 16, which was for archaeological supervision, which requested no phase of the development hereby granted in the outline planning permission, demolition or groundworks associated with the change of use until the applicant has secured implementation of a programme of archaeological works in accordance with the written scheme of investigation, which has been submitted and approved in writing by the local planning authority. This was also submitted with condition 17, which was for building recording, which is again for archaeological interest, which is no phase of the development granted outline plan permission or demolition or groundworks or for the change of use shall take place within the area until the applicant has secured the implementation of a programme of building recording. Both of these conditions were subject to the council archaeologist, who deemed them acceptable and has recommended the application been discharged and are happy with the details submitted. I was aware that the parish council did raise concern that the document was not available online, which was then corrected. That was due to internal server error. That was corrected, and an email was sent back to the parish council in order to clarify this condition. The second one was for 18A, which is for contamination, which is for no phase of the development granted outline permission, demolition or groundworks associated with the change of use shall take place until a scheme to deal with contamination has been submitted. This is for only section A, which included an investigation and risk assessment, a report of the findings, identifying the nature and extent of any contamination on the site, including assessment of the potential risks to human health, property and the environment, and includes a appraisal of remedial options and proposal of preferred options. This condition was assessed by the council's environmental health officer, and this was deemed acceptable. Further clarification can be asked from the environmental health officer, who is here with us tonight. However, some of the documents to be considered are under the original application, the 20 outmatch. So some of the documents that were available also referred to previous ones that were submitted. I think that's what caused some of the confusion from the parish council, was because it referred to documents which didn't appear online, however they were under the original. So I think that's what caused a bit of the confusion. And then we move on to condition 18B to D, which includes a submission of a remediation scheme, monitoring and maintenance scheme, and it's had to be prepared by a competent person with a recognised qualification. This again was deemed acceptable by our environmental health officers, with the concern that we have to allow some phase of demolition to begin in order to find out further contamination risks on the site. Again, this is just for the demolition phase, and so we can require further information. The condition is worded so it allows approval in phases, and so further construction methods, sorry, can't get my words out. Further contamination statements can be requested. Then we move on to the construction management statement, which again is no phase of the development shall be granted until site setup plan, parking of vehicles on site, loading and unloading plant materials, storage, security hoarding, temporary access, wheel washing, measures to control dust, dirt, noise, piling for foundations, if any, a scheme for recycling and disposing of waste, hours of construction and demolition, hours of deliveries, ensuring public rights of way are kept open, and lighting of areas and construction compounds. Again, this is just for the demolition phase and can be required again for the construction phase. This was deemed acceptable by our environmental health officer and our highways officer. There was one representation received in regards to impact of noise, vibration, dust. It doesn't provide any measured in decibels, was a concern raised on neighbouring dwellings, and it was adverse effects on local properties. These were the conditions raised. Again, the local highways authority have reviewed the documents, and we did go back to the agent for further clarification that it was just for demolition, and this was clarified. So the condition is worded in such a way to allow approval in phases, and the recommendation also states that the construction method statement is only for the demolition phase, and therefore when it comes to the construction phase, this can all be submitted again and further details. This was the access route recommended within the construction management plan, and this was the site setup plan recommended within this as well. And we also have the directional routes of traffic within the site and the preferred haulage route. Then we had condition 20, which was for the construction environmental management plan. This was again, so no phase of the development until the construction environmental management plan was submitted and approved. This includes risk assessment of potential damaging construction activities, biodiversity protection zones, practical measures, the location and timing of sensitive works, the times during construction when specialist ecologists need to present on site, responsible persons, the role and responsibilities of an ecological clerk, and the use of protective fences. This has now been looked at by the council's ecologist and has been deemed acceptable. Again, this is only for the demolition phase, and further submissions will be required for the construction phase. We also have condition 21, which is the ecological mitigation and enhancement plan, which the plan shall take account of mitigation in the environmental statement that was also included within the original application under the 20 outmatch. This includes description and evaluation of features to be managed and created, aims and objectives of management, appropriate management options, aims and objectives, prescriptions of management actions, preparation of a costed schedule for securing biodiversity enhancements, ongoing compliance reports, monitoring and remedial measures, how the habitat enhancements are being managed long-term, and to ensure net gain legacy, measures to build biodiversity into the design of the new dwellings, a sensitive lighting strategy, and a biodiversity net gain calculation. Again, this is for demolition and can be applied again for the construction phase of the development. There was concern that has changed. So the parish council raised that some of the ecological documents were not available online. As a council, we did not make these public access due to concerns with protected species. However, since then, our policy on this has changed quite recently. So they are now available on the website for public to view, with just the caveat that any animals obviously that are disturbed, it comes under the Wildlife Act. And this is a copy of the ecological mitigation and enhancement plan that has been submitted, and it includes locations of bat boxes, owl boxes. I believe some of the bat housing, I think that's what you call it, that has been constructed on site under Natural England licensing. So there has been concerns from local residents about a building on site. However, this is under their Natural England license in order to help move the bats that will be disturbed by the demolition phase. That clarifies everything. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Mr. Garner, would you care to pass any comments on this application?
Yes, I can, Chairman. Thank you. Your highway officers are obviously interested in the planning application that considers the construction management plan. The site is obviously very extensive, so extensive it has its own internal haul routes for larger vehicles as buildings are taken down. All large vehicles will enter and leave the site via the main access onto the high street. There is a haul route that then takes HGVs to and from the A34. I appreciate it may not be ideal in places, but it is considered to be the best route to get large vehicles directly onto the strategic highway network. The construction workers, we're expecting some 20 to 40 workers over what is a 72-week planned demolition of the buildings on the site, and they will be accessed to the car park off of Churn Road. It's only 20 to 40 staff at most. I do not envisage any problems with that. So on that basis, your highway officers find the CMS to be acceptable and recommend it for approval.
Thank you very much. Our scientific officer is with us this evening, Ms. Mayers, referred to as the environmental health officer as well. Do you like to pass any comment, please?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. We are happy with the site investigation reports that have been submitted as part of the original planning application and the additional site investigation reports and remediation strategy that have now been submitted under condition 18. I think it's important to make clear that these investigations to date have not identified site-wide contamination, but rather some pockets of isolated contamination. The remediation consultant is clearly aware of all the issues on site. The remediation strategy has detailed proposals as to how these hotspots and pockets of contamination will be remediated and validated. It is made clear as well that there are areas of the site that have yet to be investigated due to the presence of buildings on site. So some demolition must be allowed in order to allow access for these additional investigations to be carried out so that the remediation proposals can be finalised. After all the remediation works are complete, a validation report still needs to be submitted prior to occupation that demonstrates the effectiveness of the remediation that's been carried out and that the site has been made suitable for use. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, next we're going to move on to the Parish Council representative, Judith Cunningham, who I believe, sorry, no, we'll come back to that later, Anthony. Sorry, Judith Cunningham Compton should be with us via Zoom. Yes, just wait for her to join us. Good evening.
Good evening.
How are you doing? Have you been listening? Do you know you've got 5 minutes? You know, you'll get a minute warning, right?
Yes.
Are you ready to go?
Yes, good evening. Thank you. Compton Parish Council were disappointed to be deferred from the last WAPC. However, remain grateful that the committee is taking the time to review the application for the Institute site in Compton this evening. Parish Council had requested its district councillor refer these applications to the committee due to the lack of documentation available on the website and for public consideration within the allocated timeframe of consultation. This is a significant build for a rural community, including extensive site demolition and decontamination, The parish council have engaged a planning solicitor to assist with the due diligence on every application that comes forward for consultation in relation to the Institute site. This, we believe, is the correct course of action to ensure full transparency and the best outcome for the community. Since the parish council raised concerns regarding lack of documentation, some has become available. However, the planning officer has not responded to the parish council's questions and concerns raised as part of the consultation, nor did they inform the parish council when missing documentation was made viewable. As you are aware, the committee were required to previously defer 2 of the items as the council's ecologist representative was yet to make comment. Comment was posted to the planning portal on the 27th of July, and the parish council notes that while the construction environmental management plan must be adhered to, adjustments could be made on receipt on written confirmation from the planning department. Compton Parish Council request to be consulted where any such adjustments were to be proposed. Given the significance of this site, the Parish Council requests that ongoing forward greater emphasis is applied in ensuring that planning consultation can be completed to the highest degree with full and timely transparency of all relevant documentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Members, questions? Anthony?
Question to first officer.
No, that will come later on. But this is for the parish councillor.
Okay, it's
of
just
what she presented only.
okay. So just a simple question: are you still standing by your letter on the 18th April 2023 to say you're objecting to all the 5 conditions, and you would require a response from the planning officers? Are you suggesting that you've not received that yet, or?
Correct.
Okay, anything else? No, any other councillors, any other questions? No. Thank you very much for taking the time to present to us this evening, and I'm sure more, I would stick around and listen online. I'm sure there'll be more debate later.
Thank you.
I don't have anybody down as objectors or supporters again. But I do have the applicant/agent, which is Homes England, really is Homes England this time. Mr. John Turner, is that correct? Okay, up to you then, sir. So obviously you've been around, so you know how it works. Let me know when you're ready.
Yep.
Here we go.
Yeah, thank you very much. I'm John Turner. I work for Homes England. Firstly, I know you've probably heard or spoken to a few Homes England people recently, Lydia, Mike, Juliet. We are all in one team. We'd all work together. It's not a series of Homes England people dropping in and out with a project. I'm here today because of some holiday commitments at this time of year. There's just 3 areas that we felt would be useful to perhaps touch on and provide hopefully some reassurance on. Firstly, communication. We've been working closely with officers and more recently the parish to make sure that concerns from our request to discharge these conditions have been explained, and we've tried to incorporate them into day-to-day practice. And we're committed to forging a strong link with the parish council. We've met with them very recently, and going forward, we'll ensure that key messages, dates and milestones are communicated to local residents. And we've agreed to give regular updates via the parish newsletter, and our contractor Cognition is happy to discuss any queries or concerns that anyone in the community has throughout the duration of the works. Next, on to the conditions themselves. As already has been touched on, I wanted to emphasise that the planning conditions at this committee relate only to those that allow a contractor to start demolition and remediation of the site. There'll be another set of planning conditions submitted to the planning authority once the next stage development is reached, which will be reserved matters, and officers in the parish will be furnished with those details so they can make a decision on those conditions at that stage. And we've been working with the officers responsible for the technical checking of the planning conditions here today. And as you heard, officers have reported that they have the information required for them to recommend approving the discharge of them. And then lastly, quickly on the some of the additional external scrutiny that we're under. So to address this with our contractor, we've worked closely with a range of expert consultants and regulatory agencies to ensure that the information submitted alongside these planning conditions is thorough and correct, and hopefully what the officers require. And due to the nature of the site, there are further specialist agencies and permits in place that require an additional level of scrutiny to ensure that we are indeed correctly and safely remediating this site. And we've also employed additional consultants to monitor our compliance and gather evidence to certify that all procedures are correctly being followed. And I guess in simple summary, we're committed to working with the parish, yourselves, to do the best job possible and prepare the site for what hopefully will be a great scheme in the future.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Vickers.
Mr. Turner, very good to hear what you have said, that you want to be as transparent as possible and work with the community. Clearly, there is potential in the age of sort of social media for a lot of mistruths to get out about what's going on such a sensitive site with such a history. Do you see yourselves as the applicants having the main role in dealing with this, trying to anticipate the sorts of things that might fear and dealing with them? I'm thinking in terms of what sort of channels are you envisaging using? Would there be a weekly blog or some way in which you can be as transparent and as immediate as possible? Perhaps you could elaborate on this. I mean, many members of this committee are quite new to this whole area. We've got, had elections and new members, and we haven't perhaps all had the benefit of the detail of the background. And same maybe with the case with residents of Compton coming and going over the years. Could you say a bit more about that? Is that right, Chairman, if we ask for that now?
You've asked now, so yeah.
All right.
Yeah, I mean, we've had some discussions with the parish, as I said, about reporting via the newsletter. We can, if we haven't already, issue contact details for the key project personnel, both from a Homes England and Cognition perspective. In terms of social media, I think it's probably best that we discuss with our own internal communications team back at Homes England, and perhaps we can, because you're right, things do occur on social media, and perhaps we can agree a suitable social media strategy, if not already in place with the parish that works.
Thank you very much. There's a potential for reputational damage in all this, which we want to try and forestall. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Any other members' questions? Mr. Barnett, Councillor Barnett.
Thanks, Chairman. Mr. Turner, and it's following on from Councillor Vickers on transparency. My understanding is that certain activities already commenced. Is that correct?
The contractor has mobilised on site and is poised, ready to start. And as Councillor Abbs flagged, there's the BAT hotels have been constructed in accordance with the Natural England licence, but the work's predicated on the conditions. Contractor is poised and ready to go, subject to discharge of these conditions.
Right. Okay. Can I continue on, Chairman? Another question, Chairman. Chairman, could I continue on?
Yes, sorry, yeah, I'm just
obviously, I've witnessed a certain environmental company coming off the site, so I'm aware that activities are taking place. Is vehicles actually accessing? You've heard Mr. Gollard mention about the access routes, and I have noticed that certain vehicles have been gingerly going around the very tight turns at East Ilsley, very difficult. Are you making sure that those vehicles are going to be informed that they've got to take a lot of care and attention going around those sharp bends, and they're very narrow and it's difficult to pass, in fact impossible to pass?
Yeah, I can certainly feed back to the contractor and our consultant managing. That's a key point to consider and emphasise that is clearly followed through.
Okay, thank you. Anthony, you have a question?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Mr. Turner. Are you aware of the ground report recommendations? I'm having this one. Section 12 calls for conclusions and recommendations. Are you aware of this one? And understand?
Personally, not the full technical detail. I didn't draft the report.
Because the whole the discharge condition states that we should be able to kind of act on those recommendations. Those
Yeah,
recommendations.
do apologise, councillor, but that's not clarification on anything that was presented. That's an open question,
so
I'm
I'll-
afraid. I
I'll-
do apologise.
Sorry.
Sorry. Yeah. Has any of the members got a question? No, I do have one myself. You mentioned the contractor several times. Have you worked with this contractor before? And if so, where, please?
Yeah, they've done work down at Coypool in Plymouth for us, which is a former China Clay Works. And they've also done some recent demolition on our Panshanger site in Hertfordshire.
Okay, so they're a known entity to you?
Yeah, that's two personally that I'm aware of. So yeah.
Okay, lovely. Thanks. That was me done. Anybody else? Any more for any more? Thank you very much then. And next we're going to move to the ward member. I assume she would like to say something. Caroline Culver. You're fully aware of the procedure, I'm sure.
Yes, just hoping this balance is okay.
Have you prepared a speech?
I have. I like to do it free form usually, but because of its complexity, I thought it'd be best to write it down. Right, thank you, Chairman, and thank you, members. The Parish Council asked me to call these conditions in for a number of reasons, including the absence of some of the documents ahead of the comments deadline, as the Parish Councillor has mentioned, and Ms Kirby has dealt with that earlier this evening. But I would urge the Council to please ensure that they have actually gone live on the planning portal in future once they've gone into the system. Regarding condition 18 on decontamination, the Homes England cover letter of the 27th of March 2023 on the planning portal says the following: since the proposal is to remove contaminants from the site, a large amount of maintenance and monitoring is not considered necessary. Bear in mind that this cover letter was available on the planning portal ahead of the comments deadline, but the accompanying document was not. And I think this is one of the reasons why it set hairs running and alarm bells. The remediation scheme and remediation strategy, which are now on the planning portal, detail the contaminants on the site, and residents who used to work on the site and still live in the village are very aware of what is there. The remediation scheme says the following: it is considered that the potential adverse public perception from radiological and biological hazards will outweigh any benefits from in situ remediation technologies. It is therefore considered that in situ treatment of biological and radioactive material are not suitable, and therefore off-site disposal to an appropriate facility is most appropriate. Note here that the use of adverse public perception is emphasised, which is of great concern to myself and the Parish Council. In a letter of the 27th of April, Compton Parish Council also asked for evidence of enforcement plans. The remediation scheme says not all materials that may require remediation have yet been identified at the site. Further investigation work is required. So ongoing enforcement is really, really important. Remediation strategy says material associated with historic nuclear weapons testing was placed into pots, which are basically concrete tubes. No uranium isotopes were identified in the 3 pots that were sampled, but there are 38 others which have not been sampled. So it is entirely possible that uranium isotopes will be found. Again, a reason why contamination processes and enforcement are really, really important in this instance. Careful monitoring and enforcement should happen on site before material is stuck in trucks and taken through Compton and East Ilsley. Councillor Barnett mentioned about East Ilsley. All of the traffic is going to be going through there onto the A34. We need to make sure everything is in a good condition before it leaves the site. Residents have raised concerns with me about what happens if there is an emergency on site and material becomes airborne or leaches into the River Pang, which is only 15 metres away from the site entrance. Homes England have met with Compton Parish Council recently, and I thank them for that engagement, and they will be meeting East Ilsley soon, in my understanding. I have put them in touch with the editor of Compilations magazine, which is read by the residents of Compton and East Ilsley, and I've stressed the importance of timely and transparent communication with the community. I've also recommended to Homes England that they make use of the village's popular Facebook page, which is also followed by residents from neighbouring villages who will also be interested in what's happening. If there is any chance demolition vehicles will pass through Hampstead Norreys, I would urge Homes England to also engage with that community. Going on to condition 20, construction and environmental management plan. This stipulates working hours, but does not mention school hours, which is something that we did put in the conditions when we approved this application in February 2022. So I would urge us this evening to make sure that that is conditioned about the school hours. We have a lot of buses going through East Ilsley into Compton in the mornings and the evenings. And again, as Councillor Barnett said, that is going to cause problems, particularly in East Ilsley. The SEMP document includes grids which detail how internal monitoring and communication will be done between the client and the contractors of any pollution incidents, but it doesn't mention informing the council and the Environment Agency or the wider community.
1 minute.
So I would, thank you, Chairman, I would urge them to go back and revisit that document and detail how that will be done as well. The SEMP also says a project community liaison plan will be established to provide a framework for managing communications. I look forward to seeing this and urge Homes England to communicate with me as the ward councillor and with the parish council going forwards. Nobody wants to leave this, the site in the state that it is in, but they do want to make sure the job is done properly. And there are lots of people who live there, who worked on the site, their parents worked on the site and so forth. So they are very, very alert to problems that might arise. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much. I'm actually going to jump in first for a change and then open it up to members if you don't mind. You opened with a statement that seemed, that I certainly interpreted you saying this is what the parish feedback was. But as you spoke, it seemed to be what you think. Which is true, or is it both true?
So one of the bases for the call-in was the parish council's concern that not all of the documents they needed to read were available on the portal ahead of the consultation deadline.
Okay.
Yeah.
So everything you presented is what you believe as well? Or?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay.
I've had detailed discussions with the parish council. And as I mentioned, the fact the covering letter was on site, which said that the various things weren't needed, but the additional documents were not available, meant people couldn't read those additional documents and be reassured that those things were being looked at properly.
Yeah, I'm sure we'll get more. Okay, Councillor Vickers.
Thank you, Councillor Culver. That what you said was thoroughly reassuring, actually, that you're clearly on the case, as are the parish council. My concern is you've already mentioned nuclear waste. Are you happy that everybody in the village and elsewhere, I suppose, who has knowledge of what actually happened on that site is free to say what they know? Because some of this material, some of the activities on this site were extremely sensitive and involving very dangerous substances potentially. So we need the confidence that people are able to contribute their knowledge to the whole process.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Vickers. I know that a number of them did submit responses to the initial consultation when we discussed the hybrid application back in February 2022. And some of them did raise exactly that issue about the waste from nuclear fallout from Bikini Atoll, for example. I would hope that those members of the community who did work on the site and have knowledge would be, if they wanted to ask questions, I would hope that Homes England and the contractors would be content to have those discussions with them in the interests of openness and to reassure them.
Yeah, thank you. Any other members? Any other questions? No, looks like it. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm just waiting for Councillor Cole to resume her seat. We're going to move on to clarification questions of officers. I'm sure members must have at least one. Who wants to go first? Councillor Hooker.
Well, I'll open up. It's for Mr. Goddard. Mr. Goddard, with regard to the construction management plan as such, you may not know, but before the boundary changes, East Ilsley was in my ward, and then it's gone over to Councillor Culver, and I lost East Ilsley. But whilst in yeah. Thank you. Yeah, whilst district councillor there was a concern with regards to the speed of traffic around that labyrinth, which, as you know, it used to be the old A34, believe it or not, but it's not now. But the concern was the speed of the traffic and the school and the lack of payments. And I took that to the speed panel and managed to get the speed changed from 30 mile an hour down to 20 mile an hour. I'm sure you remember all that and the panel meeting, what have you. As a part of the consideration of what was discussed this evening about this vast amount of traffic and large traffic, and already it's been identified of going through that labyrinth, is there any consideration within that plan or could be looked at further in our discussion with regards to limiting or not allowing these large vehicles to go in half an hour, 3/4 of an hour before children go to school, and half an hour or whatever we decide after the school closes? Because most of those children that go to that school are from East Ilsley, and the way they get to school is walking. And I get back to this whole business of concern of safety of reducing the speed to 20. Thank you, Chairman.
Chairman, thank you for your question there, Councillor Hooker. I am pleased to inform the committee that the CMS does include restrictions on all large vehicles during the busier parts of the day on the network in Compton and East Easley, and that includes school opening and closing hours. There will be no large vehicles, for instance, between 08:30 and 9:30, and then in the afternoon when schools close. We have considered this, and also it reduces construction traffic during obviously the peak travel periods of the day. So I'm pleased to say that that has been considered and included in the plan.
Thank you, Mr. Goddard. Very reassuring.
Thank you. Anthony, I believe you had your hand raised.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Just a question to the case officer, Shane. In terms of the document, this was mentioned as not available. I still can't find it out, but I think it would be available in the online portal for us to read. The important point I'm making is that we've heard officers and you're saying that you're happy with the objectives of those report and the recommendations from them. Are there any risks or any recommendations from there which we should be aware to make these decisions now?
Thank you, Councillor. All of the documents and the submission have been assessed by myself and the specialist consultees such as ecology, highways, environmental health, etc. So they've gone to their own specific specialist as well as myself, and they've been every single one has been deemed acceptable. Some of the documents wouldn't be available because they were under the original application, and I believe for the website, in order to save a space, some of the documents, once an application has been approved, are then taken off automatically, but they can still be accessed from ourselves, or they can come into the office, etc. Just to save space. It is something we're looking at, and I think we've had some server updates in recent years in terms of documents becoming available, because my internal system is different, but it is something that we are now aware of. We do appreciate, obviously, the parish council flagging that to us, because from my side, it all seems to work. So if the quicker they do flag it, but yeah, it is something that we will check in future, but all the documents have been assessed by their relevant specialist and deemed acceptable.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Vickers, did I not see your hand up earlier? Okay, then Councillor Culver. Oh no, sorry, Councillor Codling first, then Councillor Culver.
Thank you, Chairman. Following on from Councillor Hooker's question about limiting when vehicle movements will be made, how do you actually enforce that? Because I'm aware of another site within Newbury that the vehicles are not travelling the route they should be. And I have flagged this up with enforcement, but how do you enforce this about those hours?
I have to say, we would rely on the local community and planning enforcement officers to be eyes and ears for us. As I said earlier on, the large vehicles will enter and leave the site via the main access into the high street. So obviously when they leave the site, they turn right. The CMS does include driver induction training, so they're told what route to take, and all deliveries are managed and scheduled. So I think it's possible that we can be outside the access certain periods of the day if we receive complaints, and we can see which direction the vehicles are going and at what times. I think that's one of the reasons why we have a dedicated haul route, so we can see what they're going. Hope that helps.
Councillor Culver.
Thank you, Chairman. Mr Goddard, could you just clarify which document mentions the school hours? Because I've got the SEMP document open and it mentions working hours, but not school hours.
I'm looking at the construction method statement.
Right. Thank you.
That it's different to the construction environmental management plan.
Okay, thank you.
Well, Chairman, if I can just add for Councillor Culver on that point as well. You mentioned there being a condition on the outline about the school hours. So regardless of what's in these documents now, they would have to comply with that condition as well. It wouldn't supersede it.
I have one question of the officers, if everybody else has had a go. Yep, excellent. I really, the probably thing I'm hearing is, and you've heard it as well, is this lack of information at the right time to the right people. And it's come out several times. What is the statutory situation in terms of what we must do, which is not quite the same as what we should do, but what must we do? And are we sure we're actually abiding by these rules?
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. The common practice with discharge of conditions, because at this stage they're usually a technical exercise, is the consultation is limited to those consultees who recommended the conditions. So in that respect, the normal process has been followed. We do make everything public as well, but the normal process has been followed, consistent with how we deal with all applications.
So are you saying the parish's concerns are not valid? Or?
No, but they're not. No, that's not what I'm saying. But the process we followed in terms of consultation is there is no statutory requirement for consultation on the discharge of conditions. Our process has been for some time that we would consult with the relevant technical consultees rather than public consultation. That is obviously something that can be a council policy that can be looked at separately, but I can assure members that the application is being considered in accordance with the legislation and our policy.
Other members may agree, will disagree with me later on. It's not debate, but I'd like to know whether or not we could make that as if we were to approve some kind of condition associated with the approval, that the communication is dealt with to certain bodies that we specify rather than just what are statutory. Have a think about it. We'll come back.
I think that might be something you need to discuss at PAG to start with, if you want to widen what we do in terms of consultation.
I was thinking of this specific application because of its specific conditions and so on.
I think as Mr. Dre's just said, in terms of this application, we followed the legislation and our current policies.
Okay, right. Councillor Hooker, did you look like you were?
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. A question for the officers and maybe Mr. Dre. This is a question with regards to the decontamination of the land. We've got several phases. We've got
just one moment, your microphone seems to have stopped.
Is it going? It's a bit dodgy, isn't it? So we've got the decommissioning of the land of the buildings, obviously straightforward, and a small percentage of this site is contaminated. How far do we go in looking at the competence? It's one thing to knock buildings down that are clean. It's another thing for land remediation of radioactive waste, of which we've sort of dodged around the subject, but that's what we're talking about here. And we're talking about biological radioactive waste, and we're talking about radionuclide waste in the form of wet waste, dry waste, and metallic waste. Now, when we get into moving this sort of stuff,
If we change councillor Hooker's. Yeah.
Once you get into this sort of material and moving it about, we've got all sorts of issues, not only with the transportation, obviously the setting up of the sites, the containment of it, making sure it's not spread when it goes outside the building, outside the area, but also the actual disposal of it, whether it be incineration or whatever, if it's biological waste, or whether it's canning and burial in the other waste. And the other consideration I'd just like to mention is that we make sure that
Sorry,
there's not
councillor,
waste.
that's okay, just, I'm fascinated by what you're saying. Unfortunately, it sounds a bit like debate rather
Well,
than a
I'm
question of
looking
the officer though. So.
Well, I'm looking really just the competence of the contractor, but we're not looking whether we're looking at the fact that there's waste buried at depths that is considered to be safe and won't be dug up because it's so deep and theoretically considered safe. I mean, how far have we gone in all those issues, please? That's what concerns me.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, councillor. I might only be able to answer some of it. I might have to pass over to Erica here. In terms of competence of the contractors, I mean, that's out of our control. However, they do have their own permits legislation that they need to abide by. And it's also down to Homes England as well to ensure that their contractors are carrying out taking away the waste, etc., competently. But most of this will be under their own environmental permits from the environmental health, but also like the EA and other documents. Unless, does the environmental health officer have anything else to add?
Yes, thank you. So the principal remediation contractor, Cognition Land and Water, we've worked with before. They were the principal remediation contractor for Stirling Industrial Estate, which the Environment Agency described as one of the most polluted sites in the south of country. There was significant groundwater pollution. We've worked with them. They have satisfactorily carried out remediation of that site. So we've worked with them before and we have every confidence in them. The remediation strategy that they've prepared and submitted under condition 18. In the appendices, there are also other specialist remediation reports which have been prepared. So Aurora Health Physics Services are radiological specialists that have carried out extensive investigations at the site and have prepared a remediation strategy for what has already been identified at the site, and the further surveys, investigations and testing that need to be carried out in the areas that have yet to be investigated due to the presence of buildings on site. An additional report has also been prepared by Public Health England on biological agent persistence, and they've also made recommendations. They have also stated that obviously the principal contractor, Cognition Land and Water, will be on site throughout the works, as will a dedicated radiation protection team from Aurora, which will consist of several different specialists involved in the survey, remediation, storage, disposal and transport of radiological and biological waste on the site. And Public Health England have also said that they are more than happy to visit site to offer any assistance. We are happy with all the proposals that have been submitted, that the site's going to be covered thoroughly with further investigation. And those investigations, they'll submit additional remediation proposals to us, which we will check. And following all these works, further validation reports will need to be submitted to show that all this has been effective and the site is suitable for use. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. That covered my points with regard to radiological protection advisors being on site, and that was reassuring. We're going down the right route. Thank you.
Lovely. Thank you. Councillor Barnett.
Well, I think part of the questions have been answered. I'm in a similar position as Councillor Hooker, previously worked for the nuclear industry along with Dr. Bryant in the audience, and of course, you know, we've had experience in these different aspects. And the point I was hoping to hear, and I've just heard, that it's a case of Cognition might well be the major contractor, but it's the contractors that would be used, especially one company, and I've got to declare an interest because I've worked for them as well, Aurora, very experienced company, very well knowledge in radiological protection, and I'm now more reassured that they will get to the bottom of anything that's found. They've got experience in their staffing. Thank you.
Sorry, what was the question, Councillor Barnett?
The question basically was I assured, I am now assured
you are
from the
assured, right,
comments that's just been said by an officer.
Thank you very much. Any other members? Any other questions of clarification of the officers? Okay, then we are going to move into debate. Councillor Vickers, you were quick up there.
Yeah, I do feel, Chairman, that again, as portfolio holder, I should deal with this issue head on. You know, I'm thinking that if you want to avoid being blinded by a flashlight being shone in your eye, you keep the lights on all the time. So what I'm saying is that if we've got documents that can be put in the public domain, whether it is statutory requirement to do so or not, in a case like this, which has such potential for negative reputational damage and for the sort of, you know, tabloid stories we really don't want, then let's do more than what we absolutely have to. I think we will take this to PAG for a discussion, but I think we've got to be sensible about this. This is a highly sensitive site. We have a community in Compton and around here that is quite well qualified to know what the risks are. And we shouldn't be treated like people who are dumb and don't need to know. We do need to know. As a council, we need to have our backside covered. So let's be a bit more open and transparent. I was quite shocked at how thin the report was. All it really was a restatement of conditions with absolutely no summary of what the experts had been beavering away producing in the past. So you're relying on us trusting you officers. Officers come and go. The council doesn't. The council is here to take responsibility in perpetuity for what happens while this work is happening. And we are the members here and now who have to feel that we can carry that responsibility during our time of office. So please, officers, trust us and trust the public to be sensible. Otherwise, we're going to be in big trouble on this. So I really can't say whether or not we should accept this, but I want this work to continue. And I do trust, you know, having heard Homes England saying they know these contractors, this is a high risk project. We've got to trust these people, but let's not leave ourselves open to this flashlight being shone in our eyes, if you get my analogy.
Okay, I'm just going to pause there and Sharon Amal wants like to make a statement.
Sorry, I just wanted to say in light of your comment, Councillor Vickers, obviously if any member feels they don't have enough information, then they shouldn't be voting on the item. So, you know, if that is the case and that's how members feel and they require more information to make a decision, then I think given what you've said, you know, I know it's not convenient for officers to say that given the items, but I think in terms of due process, if members don't feel they have the information, then we should not be making a decision.
Thank you, Ms. Salma.
Okay, well, given what you've just said there, I'd like to just pause for a second. Can I take a show of hands on whether there is a consensus of whether we feel that we have enough information or not? How do I run that vote or don't? Can I just ask for a show of hands?
Well, I think we would have to go through each item because there might well be some that there might well be the case, and maybe we should continue with the debate that it's only on some conditions that you don't feel you have enough information or the officers cannot provide you with that reassurance tonight. Because of course, it might be the case that if you've got a specific question or any further questions, officers can clarify it tonight and you then do have enough information.
If I can come back, Chairman, as I raise this, I think given that what we've heard is that there will be continuing, that, you know, this is enough to enable the work to start and that officers will be monitoring and will require further investigation. I'd just like to think that in principle going forward on this site, if not on other major sites, that we keep the documents that we have in the public domain so that those who have the knowledge and can scrutinise and be checking on this can see them. What we've heard is that at the outset, there were documents that had been archived or just kept out of sight, and we weren't, because you didn't have to put them in the public domain for a wider consultation, you didn't. I just think that's the wrong approach.
Okay,
would it be, sorry, would it be helpful if officers clarify exactly what happened and what is available? Because I don't know if it's how long they weren't available. And I think, did you say something, Ms. Kirby might have said something about the server error?
Clarify that. So with the original, it's what we do for all planning applications. Once they've been determined, so all our planning application documents are available on our website. But what we do, once we've determined an application, because sometimes there's such a lot of documents. So I think for the previous application, I think there was 1,400 documents. That takes up a lot of space. So what it does is it automatically takes it off the website because it saves space. It just makes our website crash and nobody can find anything. But they are still available. So they can contact.
As chairman, I think I'm going to put a stop to it. By the way, that as a reason is a really poor excuse. This gets full and it crashes. If that's really where our planning portal's at, then let's have another chat, because that's not something I want to be hearing as Western Area Channing Plan, and that's for sure. But we have had a position taken. I want to carry on with the debate for the moment. So who's next, please? Anybody else?
Thank you, Chairman. I would just reiterate two of the points that I made. Thank you to Mr. Goddard for mentioning about the CMS and the school hours. The two things remain. The parish council did ask for sight of enforcement plans. I think if they could see some sort of enforcement plan, that would give them a lot of reassurance. And also about the SEMP, I think it does need to include information. They've got a very detailed grid about how they will communicate internally about pollution incidents, but not about how they will then communicate that with ourselves and the Environment Agency, should that be necessary. So I think if they could respectfully be asked to address that particular point, I think again, that would give reassurance to the community. Especially bearing in mind.
Are you suggesting is that some kind of condition or something?
Yeah, so just raising that in debate as, you know, so if someone proposes it, those are two things that I'd like to be conditioned.
Okay. So I can see Bob has got his finger on the button. We are meant to be in debate. Is it important that you say what you need to have to say? We're in debate. Do you need to clarify something that's being debated, or are you sure? Okay. Anthony, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. I have to apologize. I'm not an expert on this subject, but looking at the parish council, and I've asked them, and they said, yes, they stand by this letter on the 18th of April, which important thing to point out is they've sought a professional advice from a company and they've not had a response. So I'm not entirely sure and a bit concerned coming from parish council, myself representing a parish, is that we are not statutorily obliged to give response to parish council, who are the eyes and ears of the community, who hear the community at every level, and we are not providing responses to them, considering that they had taken time and effort to consult from a proper company.
Sorry, Council. What we seem to be doing is saying we're bemoaning the system as opposed to debating the application. We know as we found out a communication issue exists, that became clear this evening. But this is a debate about whether we accept officer recommendations or we reject them. We've got six separate votes to do on each item shortly.
Sorry, Chair, I'm coming to that.
You're coming to that. Okay, sorry.
The point being is I'm a bit concerned in terms of deciding on this one. So I would like to abstain on it.
You're on the fence. Okay, no worries. And anybody else like to contribute? Heather.
Thank you, Chair. I actually do have confidence in the officers, and I'm reassured by the fact that they worked with the company that cleared the Stirling Industrial Estate. That does fill me with assurance, because I know how bad that site was. So that does help my information on this.
That's good to know. Okay, well, we still need a proposer if we're going to go one way or the other. Is Councillor Vickers, is that yourself?
Yeah, I am happy to propose that we accept officer's recommendation. I think my reassurance, like Councillor Codling's, is also that there are people out there who we know are going to, be on the ball and be scrutinising this. They are the people of Compton, largely. I think.
Okay,
Who knows,
just,
know
just-
literally where the bodies are buried.
Just
in
before
some
we go
case.
any further, remember, we have to do 6 separate votes on this one. So that will be
Okay.
6 separate motions
Yeah.
and seconds and votes. Are we all clear on this?
Yeah, so it's because people could vote differently on each item. So the first one is the archaeology, the 2 archaeology conditions.
I'm certainly happy to propose that one. I think archaeology is the least of our worries.
Councillor Bennyworth to second. Is there any conditions that we think we need to apply to this?
You can't, it's conditions discharge. It's not applying.
Condition discharge. Thank you for the reminder. All those in favour? Okay, anybody against? Anybody abstaining? You've got that? Just 1 second. I know it'll take a little bit of time, but bear with us. What's next? 18 Part A, right?
18 Part A, which is the contamination investigation.
Okay, can I have a proposer, please, one way or the other? Oh, sorry, I didn't see you over there. Alistair Wollaston. Okay, seconder, please. Councillor Bennyworth. All those in favour? Okay, anybody against? Councillor Culver. Anybody abstaining? Okay. That's passed by a majority, isn't it? Okay. And third one is condition 20, I believe. Make sure I've got that. No, so apologize. Yeah, thank you very much. 18 Part BD. Is that right? Yes, 18 Part BD, it says on this form. So someone to propose or not, please?
Do you want me to clarify that?
Yes, please.
The remediation proposals for the contamination and the measures for unexpected contamination and verification.
So are we all clear on what we're doing? Proposer anywhere? Councillor Barnett, seconder, please. Councillor Hooker. All those in favour? All those against? Councillor Culver, any abstentions? Just one. Okay, so moving on to condition 19. You want to say what that is again, just to be sure everybody knows? Construction method, yeah.
Yes.
Construction method statement. Okay. Councillor Hooker.
Ensure that the school children times are in there, please, as a condition if they're not somewhere in the construction management.
So are you proposing to accept with that condition? Okay, a seconder, please. Councillor Codling, all those in favour? Anybody against? And anybody abstaining? So just one abstention. Rest in favour. So we're on to condition 20 now. Do we know where we are? Well, just to make sure everybody knows what we're voting on.
Construction environmental management plan.
Okay. Can I have a proposer, please, or not? Councillor Codling, any seconder? Councillor Bennyworth? Sorry, Wollaston. All those in favour? Anybody against? Any abstentions? And one abstention. That's closer. What is that one? Just in favour, just passed then, yeah? Okay. And finally, condition 21.
That is ecological mitigation and enhancement plan.
Okay. Could I have a proposer or not? Anybody want to go for this one? Nobody willing to propose for, so anybody willing to propose against? Oh. Yes, just remind everybody what they're being asked to vote on.
It's the ecological mitigation and enhancement plan. So if you recall the slides, that was showing where the one relating to bat boxes, those kind of measures, wasn't it, Sharon?
That help clarify anybody? Yeah, okay. Okay, councillor Codling proposed, councillor Benjamin seconded. All those in favour, please. Anybody against? And any abstentions? Just the one abstention. Right, thank you very much for that reasonably complex voting system we had to go through, but that one is now closed. So we are now going to move on to land south of, I think it was, wasn't it? Yeah, land south of Tower Works. I'm just going to do a quick poll. How long we've been going for? Does anybody need a 2-minute to 3-minute toilet break? Yes. Right, I think we're taking now just a second and we suspend the Are we all present? No. Who's missing? Who's missing? Ah, there he is. It was just Mr. Goddard, that's all. Right, resume when you're ready, please, Gordon. Right, thank you very much. We're going to go on to item 4 as it's listed for me. Land south of Tower Works. And I'm going to invite Miss Kutz to begin her presentation.
Thank you, Chairman. Okay. Right, this application is for the land to the south.
Do you want to bring the microphone just a fraction closer to you so we can hear you nice and clearly? Thank you.
There we go. Is that better? Thank you, Chairman. Apologies. Thank you, Chairman. I'm just going to start to share my screen, hopefully share the right one this time. There we go.
Thank you.
Right. This is for the application for the discharge of conditions 10, 11, 16 and 18 of planning permission 19/02979 out Madge. That granted planning permission for the construction of a new logistics warehouse building with ancillary office space and an aircraft museum building on that land. The conditions are: condition 9 is 0 carbon, condition 10, the SEMP, condition 11, LEMP, and condition 16, the travel plan. This has come to committee because there are more than 10 letters of objection. There were 28 representations and 27 were objections. The recommendation is to approve the details that have been submitted for these conditions. This is the location plan for the site, and this gives you a more detailed, this is the approved site plan from the reserved matters approval, which members will remember was granted earlier this year. The first condition, so this application is coming to committee due to the number of objections that were submitted. All consultees are satisfied with the details that have been submitted, and we consulted with highways, ecology, transport policy and environment delivery team. Whilst 28 objections have been received and a summary of the objections is included within the officer's report, some of these representations and objections refer to other applications for approval of conditions and to the reserved matters application. So the only objections which relate to the matters that are being considered tonight are to do with mainly the travel plan, because it's to Walkers, the name of the Walkers company, and some of the objectors have already raised issues about this. Saying the travel plan is not detailed, is unrealistic and not sustainable, insufficient number of parking spaces provided, implausible that a travel plan coordinator will be able to reduce risks to cyclists, the shuttle bus is not realistic, there'll be an increase in traffic, no public transport or the road suitable, lack of pavements, room for cyclists. Travelling to the museum should also be included in the travel plan. And with regards to 0 carbon, it's saying this will be breached. Carbon emissions refer only to the building, not to the whole impact and flights to and from the building. And that it's contrary to West Berkshire environment policy to address the climate crisis. However, all the consultees have been satisfied with the details that have been submitted, and there were amended plans for each of the each of the conditions that were submitted. If we work through the conditions, so condition 9 required a plan demonstrating that the building met with a requirement for zero carbon development, including construction, monitoring, reporting measures, and that development would be carried out in accordance with that plan. The zero carbon measures are to be provided through the use of air source heat pumps and roof mounted photovoltaic panels. The reduction proposed is 105%. The PV panels were already shown on the approved roof plan, which has been approved under the reserved matters application. The calculations within the report have been made in accordance with the 2021 building regulations, and the Energy Delivery Officer has confirmed that this is the appropriate calculations. She has assessed the energy statement that has been submitted, and following amendments, we are satisfied that the calculations have been properly made and that the requirement of this condition has actually been met and also exceeded. Condition 10 is the SEMP, which required a number of details to ensure the works on site protect biodiversity during the construction works. And as you can see, there's a whole list of requirements, risk assessments, identification of biodiversity protection zones, measures to reduce the impact of construction, the location and timing of sensitive works, times when specialist ecologists will need to be on site, responsible persons and line of communication, the roles and responsibility of an ecological clerk of works and the use of protective fences. And again, this needs to be implemented during the course of the development. The details that have been submitted have been reviewed by the ecologist and are considered to be acceptable. There's an ecological protection plan which has been included within the application. It sets out details such as boundary protection areas, lighting design, safeguards for things like badgers that potentially could walk through the site, or dormice and things like that. And again, the ecologist is satisfied with the details that have been submitted. Condition 11 refers to the landscape and ecological management plan and sets out which details need to be protected and managed over once the development has been implemented. Again, this sets out what's required, details of evaluation features to be managed, trends and constraints that might influence development, the objectives of the management options, schedules, and details for ongoing implementation, monitoring, and remedial measures. Again, there were amendments made to the plan, and the council's ecologist reviewed the details and was satisfied that the details submitted within the LEMP met the requirements of the condition. Condition 16 required full details of the ground and floor levels for the approved building to be submitted and approved. We have received the site section plans, and it's important for members to be aware that this plan was also submitted within the reserved matters application and has been approved under that application. So this condition is kind of good housekeeping in ensuring that the condition has been met, although the details have actually also been included within the reserved matters application. And this again is considered to be an acceptable plan. Here's some site sections. These are views of the site, which just to remind members, at the moment it is an open field with woodland around the boundaries. And the final condition is the travel plan. Travel plan was required to be approved before the building is brought into use, and it shall be implemented on commencement of the use of the development. This has been submitted and was updated following initial consultation responses. The travel plan acknowledges the difficulties with the site, although it's close to the national cycle network and cycle storage is included. The aim of the travel plan is to shift transport from individual vehicles to shared vehicle movements. A private minibus is proposed, with the route being determined based upon where employees live, and a travel plan coordinator will be appointed by the company. The highways officer has no objection to the travel plan, and the transport policy officer is also satisfied with the details that have been submitted. The recommendation is to improve all of these conditions. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Before we go on, I just need to check. Obviously, some of the comments that have been coming in about this, the precursor to this being at judicial review, I would hope the officers are going to comment on that as to why we're able to look at this evening, or why we need to look at this evening. Do you mind doing that, please?
Sure. Thank you, Chairman. Yes, members may be aware the reserve matters approval this committee granted earlier on in the year. A claim has been lodged. We are waiting for an answer from the court as to whether or not it will be heard at judicial review. So I understand this has been raised. So should you be debating this tonight? These are conditions on the outline planning permission, not the reserve matters, which is subject to a claim. There is no injunction on the proceeding with the development or any applications from the court in the meantime while that matter is being raised. So it is open to the applicant to progress their application. Obviously, they would do so at their own risk. If any decision was to be quashed following High Court proceedings, then that would be the case, but that wouldn't affect this approval. We have no planning or legal, and as local planning authority, the applicant's obviously chosen to proceed with their application, and we are required to determine the applications put before us. So I understand the concerns, but we have identified no planning or legal reasons why we shouldn't proceed with determining these applications. I don't know if Chair wants to add anything, but thank you.
No, I think you've covered everything. I mean, there is an application before the council to discharge the conditions on the outline, which is not subject to challenge. Even if the reserve matters was to be found unsound, that decision to be unsound, that wouldn't affect the outline permission, which these conditions relate to.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Mr. Goddard, over to you, I think.
Thank you, Chairman. Out of the conditions before you tonight, your highway officers are interested in the travel plan, with no comments on the other conditions. Some members may recall that highway officers did object to the original planning application when it was presented some 3 years ago, and we objected on sustainability grounds, how difficult the site was to reach by sustainable travel modes other than the car. If it was approved, then a travel plan condition would be applied, which is before you tonight. During consideration of the original planning application, the applicants promised the provision of a minibus that would collect and take their employees to and from where they live, particularly the Swindon direction, if my memory serves me correct. So this condition was a way to tie down the applicant to ensure that minibus was in fact provided, and is an integral part of the travel plan that is conditioned to be discharged tonight. Other measures, encouragement of car sharing, and the usual travel plan requirements, such as a travel plan coordinator that would make the travel plan aware to employees that it was there, and liaise with colleagues in transport policy to monitor the travel plan's implementation going forward. It is quite limited, but I think it's the best that can be done, considering the location of the site, and I recommend its approval to you. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much indeed.
Chairman, if I could just mention, Chairman, as we've discussed this, it's reminded me, as other members, I'm sure, we sat on the original application. I didn't declare an interest on this, that I've obviously looked at this previously several years ago. And I was lobbied on that first application, but I've not been lobbied at all on what we're talking about today. But I just thought I'd better mention that. I don't know if others have sat on the committee that made the decisions on the outline.
Lots of returning planning committee members probably sat on that, including myself, I'm sure, but it wouldn't occur to me to declare it as an interest, but should we?
I mean, I would consider this to be a separate application before you and to be considered on its merits. It's not as if you predetermined this application based on however you voted last time. And I mean, I think it's very similar to Mr. Goddard. He obviously, you know, opposed the last one, but is happy to approve this one. So, you know.
As long as I've mentioned it, Chairman.
Yeah, no, thank you very much for bringing it up, Councillor Hooker. Okay, normally we'd have the parish council representative, but I don't see anybody down here to speak unless my piece of paper is wrong. No, well, there's a good chance of piece of paper being wrong quite regularly. So we're now going to move on to the objectors. I have Bridget Jones and Anthony King in person to speak. Is that correct? So, you know, you've got 5 minutes. We'll give you a minute warning. It's split between the two of you. How do you want to manage it? Do you want me to give you a half-time mark or don't? Okay.
I stay here because I'm awaiting
then that's perfectly acceptable. Yes. Do you need a microphone where you are just in case you need to speak? Okay. Thank you. Well, if you do speak. Well, I'm sure we can organise a microphone to be brought to you if you've got a disability. I don't really see why we wouldn't do that. So just bear with us 30 seconds while we sort that out. Right, are you ready?
Yes, thank you, Chair. The travel plan does not contain enough detail to enable a comprehensive view of the impacts of travel to this site and the implementation of a plan for managing this into the future. Recognised best practice for a remote industrial site, unlike an urban or suburban office location, would be to include all traffic to the site and not just the workforce. For the workforce, there's no data on volume of the workforce or modal split, shift patterns, overlapping shifts, origin, destination, or shift times, etc. This is essential in this case as planning permission has been approved based on a personal condition using current traffic generated by the existing facility nearby. Why has this information not been provided and analysed? The information provided relates to the anticipated breakdown of traffic and not numbers. The report is inadequate and is based on misinformation. In attempting to justify the use of cycles to access the site, the report refers, as stated, to the regional cycle route next to the site. The plan refers to Ramsbury Road as follows. The traffic volumes at the point in which the development connects to the cycle routes are low and vehicle speeds have been observed at 46 miles per hour. This is incorrect. Much has changed with the rapid development of Membury and the roads are not safe and traffic does speed on Ramsbury Road. As part of the Community Speed Watch group, we've recorded and reported speeds of 58 miles per hour in a 40 mile per hour zone, with 91 cars travelling in one direction within a 1 hour period, and that was within the last month. The traffic generated by this development will dwarf the existing traffic. Of note, the travel transport plan was deemed impractical by Highways. 90 car parking spaces, according to the information submitted by the applicant, does not appear adequate, given that the figures for staff rose from 40 to 200. The case officer was negligent in not asking for the increased traffic figures. The response given to a public inquiry was that the applicant did not supply this information, and that's undefensible. The uplift would suggest that potentially there would be 5 times the anticipated traffic. There's also no overflow plan for weekend or bank holidays when traffic figures might be increased. Reserve matters, we understand, are there to thrash out the detail. Detail is lacking throughout the travel plan and does not include traffic going to the museum or to the aircraft to be located there. In fact, it's been specifically left out. The case officer will try to suggest that transport to the site should not be discussed at this meeting. However, given that a personal condition was granted, allowing traffic figures to be significantly suppressed, it should be considered. The TRIX data would normally be used, and this was stated by senior officers. If you apply TRIX, you will see an anticipated increase of 550 vehicles per day on roads that are not designed to carry such numbers of HGVs. The tactical avoidance of not using TRIX data misled the committee as to the actual environmental or sustainability impact that this development would have on the surrounding area and the rural road networks. What's the point of managing the environmental impact of the workforce travel when you deliberately avoid addressing the numbers generated by the biggest polluters? The shuttle bus was deemed unsustainable by Paul Goddard. It's also not enforceable. The travel plan submitted has a clause which states that should they try to make changes or they make changes to the plan, they'll inform West Berkshire Council. But by then it will be too late, the development built and operational. The roads are unsafe for pedestrians. Walkers have stated that themselves. We would argue that they're also unsafe for cyclists. And the increase in accidents on the B4000 and Ermwood Street and the 3 junctions leading to and from this site have seen a marked increase in accidents since the rapid development of industry at Membury. 3 accidents in the last week alone. The lack of road markings and signage for cyclists and pedestrians, safe access and egress or crossing points should be control measures that are in place to mitigate foreseeable risk. There are none. BREEAM, NVC version 6 should be used. The Principal Environment Officer asked the questions as to the submission being based on the old 2013 version and questions whether the 2018 submission has been updated. Has it? LEMP, landscape and ecological management plans. Is this fit for purpose, we would ask. It requires implementation and is not something for presentation purposes or to simply satisfy planning condition where there are assurances given the overall changes in landscaping. Until all questions are answered adequately and errors rectified, the condition in relation to the travel plan should not be passed.
Please wrap up now. Oh, boy, you're wrapping up. Perfect
Finished.
timing. Yeah, well done. Please stay there.
Okay.
Just bringing you a microphone just in case. And can I start to get a show of hands from members to ask questions? Tony, Anthony first, and okay, and then Caroline. Sorry. Did Howard have? Okay. Howard, did you have your? Sorry, I didn't see you. Too far away. I need to put my glasses on. Okay. So Anthony, you first, Caroline, then Howard.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Jones. Am I correct in understanding? I'm looking at the portal. There is a letter addressed to Sean and Jake by you on the date today, 25th April 2022. Is it the same letter you're standing with, or is it?
Sorry, Anthony, I don't believe you mentioned that letter.
That letter.
during the-
No, I didn't mention a letter.
So you can't refer to it, I'm afraid.
Okay, sorry. Just my question on the LEMP is that have you looked at the updated LEMP amended plan and you still?
Yeah, I still
objecting to
like
that?
some assurance.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, Caroline, you're up next. So.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you for coming to speak tonight. You mentioned 3 accidents in the past week. Are you able to very briefly outline for us what those accidents involved?
Yes, there was 2 cars that involved an accident on the Membury Junction. Membury Junction has become a very difficult junction to navigate, and there have been several serious incidents there. The previous one, I think the lady was waiting 2.5 hours for an ambulance to come and take her away. The other accident this week was by the Hare and Hounds it's now a private residence. That's the junction off Ermwood Street and the B4000 down into Lambourne. And the other one was further up at the Chiltern Folliot junction. All of them were serious accidents, although there were no fatalities. It's imminent. It's foreseeable that there will be a fatality on that road soon.
And it was just cars? It wasn't any other kind of vehicle?
No.
Okay, thank you.
No.
Councillor Wollaston.
Thank you. You spent a lot of your time talking about the local travel plan, rather. Can you just perhaps expand on what you and the other residents have got concerns about?
Well, I think what we would expect is some numbers. You know, that the plan itself lacks any detail. If it was feasible for officers to pass the transport plan based on a personal condition, which basically the applicant said, we are currently using this amount of traffic, you know, HGVs come to our site. One would expect that they could be able to extrapolate staffing figures as well. It went from 40 to 200. They must have some sort of business plan or staff rota rostering service, you know, system that would indicate some numbers. There are no numbers. The plan talks about once we appoint somebody, then we might know. But actually, no evidence was asked for as to the business case at the time, and no information given. And I think that without any information, how can you make a decision about the traffic and the transport? A personal condition, we've been assured by senior legal professionals, is a very rare thing. Yet, you know, planning officers in West Berkshire have used it twice when there's been a contentious application at Membury.
Could I add something to that, Chairman? Would you mind?
As long as it's answering the question that was asked, yes.
I think the problem is the travel plan, which is based on the workforce, normally could be determined after the application was granted, was up and running. In this case, as Bridget says, it was based on a personal condition, which means the whole of the traffic generation was based on the existing facility. Therefore, there's no reason why the existing facility couldn't be interpolated to come up with a travel plan with specifics. The current travel plan is all about percentages. And referring back to the cycling route, the statement in the report is absolutely wrong. It's a misstatement and should be removed.
Okay, thank you. Any other members? Any more questions of what's been presented? Yeah, I think I'd like to get some clarity from. Yeah, I believe you mentioned the parking side of the application, and do you want to expand on the calculations, the way you've come up to the inadequacy statement?
It's only based on what the applicant has actually stated. They've stated that there's, instead of 40 jobs, there's going to be 200 jobs. There's no breakdown as to shifts. So you have to look at the 90 spaces, of which 20 are going to be for electric charging, which is commendable. But then there are also spaces that will be for disabled. One would anticipate. It's not stated how many there will be. But given that there's 200 staff and we don't know about shift overlap, there's no detail, it could easily be inadequate. Then you've got the museum on top where there is no traffic data submitted whatsoever.
Do you have any evidence, not evidence, any kind of calculations related to the museum side of?
How would I?
No, you wouldn't.
I mean, the applicant needs to provide those, and they haven't. They haven't from the beginning provided any information about those numbers.
Thank you very much. Any other members before we move on? I appreciate your presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your time.
I don't think we've got any supporters here. So I'm going to move on to Mr. James Hicks from the Pegasus Group. I believe you're here. Yeah. So you've been sitting there all evening, so you know what to do. Over to you. Ready? Got the timer ready? What? Have I missed something? Off you go.
Good evening. Thank you, Chairman. And good evening, ladies and gentlemen. As you've heard, my name is James Hicks. I'm a Chartered Town Planner and agent for this particular application. Your officer's report sets out clearly the background to the consented development at this site through the form of the outline and the reserved matters. And I note the committee has discussed the current situation in respect of that judicial review case that is pending at this moment in time. The report also sets out that the current application is considering the details requested by officers pursuant to those conditions attached to the outline planning permission. It's well established within planning law that in discharging planning conditions, there is no opportunity to revisit or further curtail the grant of planning permission, and no further conditions can therefore be imposed. This said, as you've heard from your officers, the application seeks to discharge 5 conditions. These are pre-commencement conditions in nature relating to the outline planning permission. These conditions are generally technical in nature and our submitted details have been scrutinised by your officers and consultees where necessary. The officer's report sets out very clearly that the submitted details meet the requirements of those conditions. And whilst we've heard to the contrary this evening from other parties, the fact remains that the professionals in the room have signed those conditions off as being suitable. It follows that the committee should consider the officer's recommendations and approve the discharge of the conditions without any further delay. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Any members would like to ask a question of what was presented? Nope, I think that's it. Thank you very much indeed. Okay, I believe Councillor Wollaston would now like to take the stand. I'm not even going to say that you've got 5 minutes because you know it. So
I won't be taking 5 minutes, don't worry, Jen.
Okay.
Members will know that I oppose this application as I believed it to be the inappropriate location. It's heavily opposed by residents in my ward, which is to create significant traffic issues, as well, of course, as being in the AONB. I arranged for a substitute as I was predetermined, and consent was granted 5-4. So we are where we are. And as been mentioned already, we're just looking at conditions. The objector's done a fine job on explaining why this current application has major issues, and I don't want to go over the same ground again. What I want to focus on is part of the application, including the plans. The consent is for a museum, which was part of the original consent, not a hangar, as it is described on the plan. Membury Airfield is permitted use for light aircraft, not for twin-engine World War II cargo aircraft. Clearly, the aircraft will need to be flown in and they'll be occupied, so occasional need for aircraft movements for essential maintenance. But I would like this to be specifically conditioned. My residents do not want noisy 80-year-old aircraft flying over their homes. That's it.
Thank you very much. Any questions for Councillor Wollaston? No. Good. Thank you very much indeed.
Pleasure.
As we all know now, we go for clarification from the officers. Does any member have any question of clarification of the officers? Councillor Bennisworth, over to you first.
Thank you, Chairman. It's to Mr. Goddard and involves 2 issues, that of parking. Is it adequate, ? And accidents. Could you please expand on those? We've heard about the recent accidents.
Thank you, Chairman. Let's consider the parking issue first. The parking issue was considered in February this year when the Reserve Matters planning application came to this committee. Parking levels were considered with that particular application. Some 90 parking spaces are proposed for the building and further parking is proposed for the museum. Considering that there were 3 shifts of some 200, it was recommended to you at that time that there was enough car parking within the site, and members then subsequently approved the Reserve Matters planning application. So we have determined parking levels on this site and found them to be acceptable. I also find that every time a planning application turns up on this regarding this site of this committee, we end up talking about traffic as well. All traffic matters and sustainability matters were considered with the outline planning application in 2019. And that includes all the traffic levels on the B4000 and any accident data that there was provided at that time. We did review the accident data for the reserve matters planning application and found that over 10 years, there hadn't really been any change in the number of accidents that had taken place in the area. Now, some of the objectors may not like the sound of that, but that is what the records have told me. Now, these recent 3 accidents, I unfortunately have no knowledge of them, and it normally takes some months until the Thames Valley Police load them onto the system. For instance, we only have road personal injury accident data up to the end of 2022. So if those accidents have taken place, they won't be loaded onto the system yet. I hope that helps.
That's helpful, Mr. Goddard. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Very much. Any other member? Councillor Codling.
So what you're saying is we can't even talk about the parking. Sorry. We can't talk about the parking, is what you're saying. We're literally looking at these conditions, which include the travel plan.
Yes, Chairman. You're looking at discharging these conditions tonight, and that includes the travel plan. Is the travel plan acceptable to be approved? My recommendation that it is. It's I think, the best that can be done considering the location of the site. Now, the location of the site, we also considered at outline stage. Thank you.
Anthony next, then Councillor Vickers.
Thank you, Chairman. Again, question to Mr. Goddard. The travel plan 6.7 states, the travel plan acknowledges that the site is not suitable for pedestrians and is not readily accessible by public transport. So it's clear that it's not accessible for the public transport. So it's the minibus option is for the employees. But page 93 says the public access will be available for the museum. So are we expecting people coming to the museum to come by the minibus, or what is the plan? Because it's not accessible by public transport, or it's not suitable for pedestrians. So how are they going to access if the museum is public?
Chairman, the museum is not included in the travel plan, as has been mentioned. And I think it's difficult to include it in the travel plan because unlike employees, you don't have regular people attending the site. Employees, they will attend the site every day, they will know of the travel plan, but people visiting the museum will probably never visited it before. So it's difficult to include them in the travel plan because they would have no knowledge of it.
Sorry, Mr. Goddard. Follow-up question, Chairman, if I may. I'm not going into the details of whether the people will come to the museum or they will be interested or not. Just going by the technical details of the travel plan, which says the site is not suitable for pedestrians. So it's very clear that the pedestrians cannot access the site, or public transport. They cannot come by public transport. If the museum, if at all, is accessible for the public, there is no option for them to access by foot or by public transport. So there is no option at all for the public. So we kind of like contradicting here itself, isn't it?
Chairman, it's a good question. I have to say to you, these are the very points that I mentioned with the original planning application in 2019. Your highway officers objected to the original planning application because of the reasons that you mentioned. We said the site was unsustainable, but members of this committee, as is their democratic prerogative, took an alternative view and approved the planning application. They had to weigh up a number of other issues, including economic issues, and those issues in the end prevailed in securing and retaining an existing business in the area. And that's how the debate went.
Okay.
So you're right in what you're saying, but unfortunately, those issues have been debated and a decision was made.
Okay, I will leave it to when the debate comes. Okay, thank you.
Councillor Vickers, then Councillor Hooker.
As you know, I'm very keen on people cycling to work, but I find it hard to conceive of many people regularly commuting by bike to this location. Yes, it is a very fast road. It's a long distance to any of the places where people are likely to live. I think really this reads like greenwashing. Oh yes, it'll look good. We've got a covered cycle rack. I can't see many bikes in it. I'm not happy with the travel plan, and what the objectors said about it being based upon personal consent. Is that something that we can take into account? Because if it is true that the numbers of employees have changed since we made the decision, isn't that not something we are obliged to take into account? In the travel plan in particular. I've also got a question which is probably more to the case officer. How on earth do you reduce by more than 100% carbon dioxide emissions? Is it actually sucking carbon dioxide out of the air, this magic heating system?
Let's do one question at once, eh?
So, all right. Yes.
Which question do you want to answer?
The one about, is the travel plan fit for purpose when we've now got different numbers of employees? And in particular, would you not agree that, the provision for cycling is really not part of a serious solution?
No, it isn't. As you say, and the point we made this point 3 years ago. It's highly unlikely that people are going to cycle to the site, considering the road network in the area. But in case people may do from Lambourne, there are some cycle racks provided. And I think that's the best that we can do to cover for cycle issues. As regards to the staff numbers, I don't know whether they've changed or not. I'm not familiar with those figures. The reason why you had a personal consent in 2020 for this planning application was because the level of traffic for Walker's Logistics was lower than a normal sort of warehouse storage distribution use. And therefore, to ensure that an alternative tenant did not go in there that would have the usual higher traffic generation, it was restricted to Walker's Logistics accordingly. The travel plan itself, it aims for a 5% modal shift. It's the best you're going to get here, but at least it's something.
Okay, yep, absolutely. Second question, Councillor Vickers.
The second question, I mean, it leads me to link it to a travel plan, because if it's going to be so super efficient at generating electricity, can we perhaps have some electric charging points, and then the poor souls that are probably going to travel by individual modes will be at least producing less carbon emissions for the rest of it.
Or question?
Well, is it something that could be reasonable? And is the fact that it says 105% saving, does that mean it's actually a net generator of or a net? Sorry,
shall we?
Yeah, I think.
Yeah, thank you. I'll explain how how I understand it's calculated, and hopefully that sheds some light onto it. So, essentially, they take the baseline. Normally, you would take the baseline conditions for a building based on building regulations. They enter it into a computer model, and it has the U values, etc., for that type of building, and then you apply the measures on top of that, and you're looking for at least 100% carbon reduction from what the typical type of development is. So, and in this case, we actually take a more onerous position because our policy requires this to be purely based on renewables. So we are only looking at the residual, what's the word? So we're not taking into account building fabric. Any energy efficiency done via building fabric has already been taken into account. So our baseline is after you've taken carbon reductions from building fabric, then what you can achieve via renewables. So that's how it's calculated, and it comes out with a score of 100% based on a typical model for that type of development. I don't know if that completely answers your question, but that's how it's calculated and might clear it up a bit. But essentially, you need that score. It's been assessed by our environment delivery team, who routinely deal with these things, and that's the score they need to meet, and they've met it. via the computer model.
Thank you. I think perhaps members need a little bit of instruction on these things out of committee.
Okay, Clive, councillor Hook, you were next.
Thank you, Chairman. Two questions. As a sort of integral part of this travel plan is the travel bus provision, and this is going to pick people up as far out as Swindon, I understand, and bring them into work. There's nothing there though that ties the council or the operator, I suppose, into the longevity of that service. If people decide to come in, blow the bus, blow the bike, I'm coming in my car. What happens to a part of this travel plan we're going to pass tonight is all on a service which could be pie in the sky. If people don't use it, presumably there's no hold on to provide the bus and force people, or not force, but encourage people to take this handy bus. Thank you.
Chairman, I sympathise with that view. But the applicants promised a shuttle bus for employees. So that is what we have before us and is an integral part of the travel plan and will be monitored accordingly by colleagues within the transport policy team who will do what they can to assure its retention going forward. I hope that helps.
Thank you. We don't know whether it's charged or it's free. If it was free, it might encourage people to use it more. My second question, Chairman, if I may, is the discussion that we've had on the library and the concerns on parking of the library. Maybe the officer confirm, are the sort of 28-day notice going to be applied to the museum? It's not open 24 hours every day of the week. It's just a number, or has the application not gone in for the amount of days the museum is actually opened?
For the museum, not for the museum. I'm pretty sure there are conditions on the outline on the hours, but I don't have it in front of me. I can check that and come back to you if that's okay.
Might just allay the concerns on parking. It's not going to be used every day. Yeah.
Councillor Benworth. Oh, I could have sworn I saw your hand moving. Okay, well, nobody. Oh, sorry, Councillor Wollaston. Yeah.
I seem to recall there are conditions on the amount of hours this building can be operated in, which will prevent 3 shifts. So we're actually talking about 200 people in 2 shifts, probably. Is that correct?
Sorry, can someone actually answer that one on microphone?
I'm doing it from memory, I'm afraid, but I'm sure.
Yes, I know you're posing the question, I guess, for
Yeah, exactly.
Are there not conditions to do with restricted hours that don't allow for 3 shifts? Is that correct or incorrect, officers?
I can just go back to the other question about the public access to the museum. That is limited to 28 days per year for public access to the museum. So if that answers that query. I'm just looking through as well on the hours.
Yeah, that's right. I found the answer. It's hours of external operation. So it's not, so it's only, it reads deliveries and unloading the lorries, but excluding use of the car park for employees and parking of private motor vehicles for access for the logistics warehouse. So there could be work going on inside the buildings in those shifts. I think it was the traffic movements that was restricted in that way.
Thank you for clarifying.
Okay. I have one question from myself to Mr. Goddard related. I think I know the answer, but you're absolutely clear. No minibus, it's not viable travel plan. Correct or incorrect?
If there was no minibus, there'd be no purpose of having a travel plan at all. It is one of the few
Right.
elements of it.
So what we are being asked to determine tonight is the viability of a travel plan for a minibus.
We must assume that that is the case, and we must assume that that minibus is viable, and we will be retained accordingly.
Yeah, but
that is what's before us.
Yeah. Okay. So
I don't know.
I think we'll come back to this in debate somehow.
Can I just answer one of Councillor Vickers's points? He mentioned electric vehicle charging points. That was a condition applied at reserve matters. So there are electric vehicle charging points contained within.
It's my recollection as well, actually. So, right. Are we ready to go into debate, everybody? Who wants to lead off? Well, I can lead off if you like. I haven't done that since becoming chairman, so I'll lead off for a change. I have become more and more uneasy about the travel arrangements associated with this development. And to be quite frank, I don't think we could safely approve this application given the travel plan that's before us this evening. I've just not been convinced that what's been presented is actually sustainable, workable, or anything else. If we were able to condition longevity on that service and its effectiveness and things of that nature, I may have not have been of that mind. But at the moment, I just don't see how, unless we have an awful lot of conditions associated with how it passes the test of, yep, this will work for this location. So that's my contribution. There are other things in there as well, but well, I will also mention that I cannot see a travel plan being put in place that just completely ignores 28 days a year for museum use, and it could be incredibly popular. Just having no data whatsoever and then going, "Oh, that's okay," never sits well with me. I always want to see the data that supports what's going to happen, not some let's have a guess and let's hope it's going to be all right. So that's my contribution. I'm not sure it helped, but that's my contribution for the evening. Councillor Barnett.
I've been listening intently on some of the questioning that's been going around tonight. The previous application, I was very much of a mind to eventually consider positively and vote for the previous application. Very much on balance, I might add. But I have to say, even before the chairman's come up with these comments, I was very much inclined to think I'm very uneasy about this, and I'm feeling that I'm going to be voting against it. And that's my thought. And you've actually reiterated, Chairman, the points which I felt that was going to necessitate me to actually vote that way. So I feel that I'm not going to support this particular application tonight.
Okay, thank you very much. Anybody else like to add, Anthony?
Yeah, you've summarized my thoughts on the travel plan, Chair. Just to add on the zero carbon as well, the paragraph says that it's only for the building and not for the transport movements. But we all know that the transport movements is going to involve 80-year-old aircraft and all those noisy thing. So it is kind of not sincere and become disingenuous, like to have this discharge of this condition and to acknowledge that this site is going to have a lot of aircraft, which is going to be not zero carbon in any way. I'm not entirely sure, like even the zero carbon one is, we are sincere about it once we approve it, and then we also acknowledge that it's not going to be the case for the rest of the site. So it's kind of, I'm thinking like even the zero carbon, we all should see that how the site is in total environmentally friendly. So yeah, so that's my thought on the other thing as well. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we've concentrated tonight on the travel plan, but obviously we've got these other conditions as well, which, to be honest, I've got no real beef about. I'm quite happy with the other. But with regards to this travel plan, I think you've summed it up reasonably well there, Chairman, and others. But, I am concerned about this perceived traffic volume with this increased number of staff. I am concerned, albeit with Mr. Goddard's team of good work, I'm sure, but locals have come and made a good case tonight with regard to the speeds and accidents, which even we don't know about at the moment. I am concerned, as we discussed, about the travel bus provision over time. And I'm also concerned about the plan, I think, not sufficiently binding regarding notification of change to West Berks Council, which was mentioned. Over and above all that, I'm concerned is, and I didn't ask the question of the officers, they might remind us, I know it's not something we should consider, but just keep our eyes open to. I think this site might well be noted in the new local plan, is it not, as further development for industrial use going forward? Maybe.
Chairman, it's a proposed allocation.
Thank you. Just to make that clear, where we're going with this application, and if that is now acreage that's going to be considered for further development, that access is going to be the same. Thank you, Chairman.
Just to add to that, this was the same comment that was made when this application first came forward, that eventually it would become a piece of allocated land, and we're in 2023 and it still hasn't been, it still isn't, it's still in process, whatever that means. Anybody else? Councillor Vickers.
Yeah, I've always been opposed to this site being an employment site, but there we are. It part of it already isn't an allocated site for employment. I'm reminded of what you yourself said, Chairman, at one point, that, you know, we believe, but nobody's proved it, that people do access the site from the motorway network. Now, in a sense, that might overcome the problem of the residents if it was actually allowed. That is completely beyond planning law, but, you know, that would be my aspiration, that we can do like, you know, allow what is happening to happen and relieve the local traffic network of the burden of carrying this traffic.
As I was reminded about by Councillor Hooker, I believe, about 4 or 5 years ago, that is not something we can.
But in the meantime, the only thing I can suggest, and maybe it's a question, is it possible within the travel plan, which is the contentious item, to require some sort of an incentive? I mean, certainly to require that the minibus provided by the operator shall be free, but to go even further than that and to require that, you know, if they're serious about providing a minibus, then they must make it so attractive that it is in fact used. Otherwise, again, it's another bit of greenwash that'll mean nothing.
Well, if I may just add, before I bring you back in, Councillor Hooker, is we do have the ability to have a split decision this evening. So there are certain elements that we could, or at least that's the note that I've been handed. So I'm going to hand, if I hand to the officer before coming back to you, Councillor Hooker. So Bob, do you want to explain, please?
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Yeah, members, obviously you need to consider each condition individually, and obviously hear the concerns that have been expressed about the travel plan, but the other conditions obviously need to be assessed on their own individual merit. This is presented as one application, unlike the last one, hence why we have just the one vote. But nevertheless, if you are to refuse any part of it, you need to give reasons. And so if it would be an unsound decision if you refuse the whole application based on that. So what you can do is if you are concerned with one or more parts, is vote to make a proposal to refuse, for example, the travel plan, but approve the others as per the recommendation. So it would be unsound if you were to refuse the whole application on the travel plan, unless you gave reasons for why you found them all unsound. I'm happy to help formulating a proposal if that becomes necessary. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hooker.
Yeah, I go back to this business of the handy bus. I mean, my vision of a handy bus is something that carries 12, 14, 18 people. We're talking 200 people working. How many handy buses are we going to have? Or are we talking a handy bus is a full-size 60-seater bus? I mean, if you're going to accommodate this number of employees, this isn't just a little 18-seater running around.
Understood. Councillor Vickers.
I wasn't ever envisaging that every employee would be bused to this site, but I do think that if it's going to have any impact on the numbers of private, you know, single person journeys, then it's got to be shown to be achievable, and currently it's not. So my proposal, if you want a proposal, is that we approve all conditions discharged apart from the travel plan, and that we have a split decision but refuse the travel plan on the grounds that we don't believe it is workable. It's not worth the paper it's written on, effectively. So come back and suggest something better, or take us to appeal.
Well, you have made a proposal as such. Sorry, Mr. God, I do apologise. Almost called you councillor there. Yeah.
I thank you for considering my promotion.
It's not a promotion, I assure you.
Yeah, right, Chairman. I can see this which way this is going, but some guidance or steer from members on how this travel plan could be improved. I have to say to you, I think its potential for improvement is limited because of the location of where the site is. There is a shuttle bus proposed. I don't know how big it is. but that detail could be included. And I don't know, and I'm looking to planning officers here to how that bus can be retained regardless of viability going forward. Is that possible?
I think the proposal, they can only be a proposal ultimately if it became unviable. Then we would, and the submission was made to us, we'd have to consider that on its merits at the time. The acknowledging the locational constraints of the development, the purpose of the travel plan is to make it as sustainable as possible with these measures. Hence, the idea for a minibus is better than not providing a minibus. So I think the concerns that have been raised have been more regarding the enforceability and the incentives around it and that kind of detail. But I think as a matter of principle, there's, Mr. Goddard's saying there's little more that we can suggest that can be brought forward. And I appreciate what's been said about the cycle storage, for example, but having it there is better than not having it there. So it's good that it is included. So yeah, I don't know if that helps.
I actually want to be a bit stronger than you're suggesting, if you don't mind. As far as I'm concerned, the travel plan only becomes viable with something like with data associated with the pickups, the drop-offs, the longevity absolutely would have to be assured. Because to be honest, someone comes back and says, well, it's not viable and to have the bus service anymore, well, okay, well, the application should never have been approved then, because it's only approved if the minibus exists. So we need to absolutely be clear that this is only going forward if you can actually convince us, I guess the appeal judge would be next, that you have a sustainable system. Councillor Hooker, sorry.
I was going to say there. I mean, if we look at this in common sense, if I was working at that facility and I was on night shift and I was on a handy bus to get home and I'm in Swindon, it's a 40 minute drive and I can get there in 20 minutes in my car. I'm not going to go in the minibus. I mean, it's a nice offer to try and push this through. But in practical terms, if you were working and you can get back home in 20 minutes, you're not going to sit the last drop off, having gone through every village out to Swindon. I mean, it's pie in the sky.
My proposal stands, Chairman, and I'm.
Okay.
I don't think the travel plan is acceptable, and
I am sympathetic to a split vote, and if the members seem to be heading down that route, how do we organise that?
There's a proposal for
And that was good enough, was it?
Shall I restate?
Yeah, sure.
Chairman, I'll restate what I've recorded here. So it's a proposal to approve all of the conditions except for the travel plan condition, to refuse that. If I was to summarise what you've said, I would say it's regarding the enforceability long term, the incentives around it, and also the insufficient evidence to show that the minibus proposal
insufficient detail as to how it's going to make a difference. Yes, and data, I think you said, Chairman.
Data is always data, and takes no account of the museum traffic. No traffic plan can possibly. Well, if you don't want to accept that, that's fine. Do we have a seconder for the proposal and amendments as stated? Anthony?
Sorry, I was going to say like a request Mr. Dre to add the museum one as well into this one, because
okay, but
the museum will exist. So.
That's the proposer's remit here.
Yes, question of clarification, please, from Mr. Dre. This is one vote, isn't it? This is we can't vote on all the other parts of the application, and then.
On the previous application, because they made multiple applications, we had to do multiple votes.
Okay, no, understood.
Where it's quite common practice where we have some conditions that we find acceptable and others to which we don't, that we can issue a split decision. And basically the decision notice will say part approved, part refused as detailed below. And then for each condition, we'll say approved, refused, etc.
No, thank you. That's clear.
Okay, so we need a seconder. Or not. We have no seconder, I'm afraid, Councillor Vickers. It would appear not anyway. No, okay. Okay, Councillor Wollaston is seconding the proposal as it currently stands, which is to approve the first three elements of the application, but to refuse the fourth to do with traffic. Correct?
Yeah, the SEMP, the LEMP, the levels, and the zero carbon approved, and the
Yeah.
travel plan refused.
To be honest, my personal, I have a personal issue with the net zero as well, but I mean, it's minor, I think. So we'll put that to a vote. All those in favour, please raise their hand. It's 2. All those against? 2. How many abstaining, please? Raise your hand. Oh dear. What do we do now? We have another vote.
Ask for another proposal. So if
Gosh.
anyone is willing to do another proposal.
Right, I need another proposal then, I'm afraid. Wasn't know it was too many. Oh, I get the casting vote, don't I? That's a good point. Oh dear.
Just so it's 2-2 and everyone else abstains.
So I get the casting vote. I voted again. Well, I could possibly change my mind on the casting vote, but I'm not going to. So, no. So we need another proposal. So I'm going to make a second proposal, which is very similar to the first one, actually, in that we kind of reject the traffic, but I would also be wanting to reject the net zero. I am not convinced by the data. We didn't discuss it much at all, but I'm actually not very convinced by the data that's been presented. And that's no disrespect to the officers, but putting some numbers into a calculator and saying, yeah, that's okay, needs a bit more detail than that. So actually my proposal would be to okay the SEMP and the LEMP and reject the net zero, because I don't think there's enough data presented in the report to be sure that we're actually achieving, given the statement that was made on the screen, I'll come to you in a second, that talked about the construction, not just the ongoing, whereas Bob, you talked about the ongoing and the way they did the calculation. So it seems to me we don't actually have a net zero build at Bream Excellent, I assume it would be.
Sure, if I can clarify. So our energy delivery team have verified the looked at the energy statement, which includes standard calculations that they use to do this, and concluded that it achieves zero carbon.
Then just to back mine, I 100% say, can we go back to the presentation very early on, and one of the slides that talked about the construction methodology? And am I missing something here? Yes, Councillor. While we're doing that, did you want to make a comment, Anthony?
Chairman, I would second that proposal if it's if you're proposing.
Okay, so you'd second that. Okay. So right back at the beginning, there was a slide that talked about, there you go. Is it no development? That's 39, is it? So no development shall demonstrate how the building hereby approved will meet with the requirement of zero carbon development, including construction, not ongoing. Well, I'm reading straight from the slide. And yet you presented the calculation to me saying, okay, once it's built, it'll be 105% based on how you work things out. So for me, that's made the decision of approving 16 unsound. Because there's something unsound there. It's either is meant to include construction or it's not. So either that slide's wrong or something else is wrong. So hence my altered proposal. Okay. Motion, sorry.
Can we specifically mention that in the refusal reason that's related to sufficient information on construction?
It clearly says that it is a requirement to build the development, including construction, monitoring, reporting measures. Okay, and it just sounds like that's the case.
So we're clear in what we're presenting in the report.
Yeah.
So we're not challenging the remainder of the calculation is just the construction phase.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you.
So can I get a second? Anthony's already seconded it.
Can I also check? So the reasons for the travel plan are exactly the same as the previous proposal?
Yes.
Or there's no additions? And it's the three other ones. So it's because I think
the SEMP and LEMP, the SEMP and LEMP, we can't find any reason not to.
And the levels.
And the levels.
Yeah.
Okay. So we've got a seconder. Let's go to a vote again. All those in favour, please. Ooh. Anybody against? Oh, those abstaining, please. Okay, so we have a conclusion on that application. So the first two are passed, the second two are rejected at this point in time. I'm sure they will come back at some point. So thank you very much. How are we doing? 9:30. We have one more application to do this evening, everybody. We won't get through it in 25 minutes.
I propose that we extend.
Thank you very much. And I'll second that one if I get. No, Caroline Culver seconded that. So that's crack on, because otherwise we're in foul of that one as our time.
I mean, I'm assuming
Oh,
everyone.
sorry, I do apologise. I didn't take the vote. All
No.
those in favour of extending? Thank you very much. Anybody against? Anybody abstaining? There you go. Fine. Well, let's crack on then. So last one is to do with Downs House School, and it's an application which Ms. Ireland is going to go. Sorry? Was that a different school? Right, do apologise. Downs House School. And Ms. Ireland, sorry, I'm going to present. You ready?
Yep, just sharing my screen.
Thank you very much. Over to you.
Okay, so this is an application at the Downs School in Compton. It seeks planning permission for the extension.
Just a second. Are all members able to pay attention to the presentation? Right. Okay. So would you mind starting again, please?
No, okay, yeah, so this is the application for the Downs School in Compton. It seeks planning permission for the extension and refurbishment of the existing school sports hall. It proposes the resurfacing of an existing area of parking, an external plant compound, and solar panels on the roof. It was called in by the ward member due to residents' concerns about the design and setting in the wider landscape, privacy for children doing PE behind large glass windows, and access to exercise facilities for the members of the public. So, okay, this is the location plan. There are two areas on the site that are part of the proposal. There's the area to the south that contains existing area of parking and the existing sports hall, and an area to the north that's an existing area of parking. So that's the block plan in more detail. Also worth noting on this plan is the location of the public right-of-way, which runs along the south boundary and then up towards the north along the edge of the school playing fields. So in more detail, this is the site plan for the sports hall itself. It includes they're going to be maintaining 78 parking bays, 5 accessible parking bays, and there's the potential for 2 EV bays. A condition has been recommended to secure the EV bays. The smaller drawing, you can see the location of the extensions, which would wrap around on 3 sides of the existing hall. To the north end of the site is the area proposed to be resurfaced and marked out into various different numbers of bays, which are shown there on the screen. So this is the existing building. The current facilities fall below the minimum standards required by BB 103, area guidelines for mainstream schools published by the Department for Education. It's also noted that it's in a relatively poor state of repair. So this is the existing floor plan. Before we move on to the proposed floor plans. That's the first floor and the elevations. So it has quite a modern design on the north elevation, which is considered by officers to complement the extension to the kind of existing part of the sports hall, which would be designed to largely match. And this enlarged building would then meet the requirements of BB 103. This is the proposed plant compound, which should be located between the west elevation and the public highway. So here are the views from the highway on the left, and on the right is from the south of the building, adjacent to the public right of way. So you can just see the existing sports hall in grey there. This is the view from the public right of way towards the existing sports hall on the left. As you can see, it also joins the school playing fields. This is the entrance from the highway, one of the entrances from the highway, with the existing building behind the trees there. So this is the east elevation. As you can see, at the moment, there are no windows, although windows would be proposed on this elevation in the, well, extended scheme. The north elevation, which faces into the site. South elevation. This is the proposed car park, well, resurfaced parking area to the north end of the site. Now, there have been several concerns raised with regards to the application, both by the parish and in 2 letters of objection. It's considered by officers in principle that this application is acceptable. It's within settlement, it's on an existing school site, and there's an existing sports hall there. In terms of design and glazing, which has been the subject of concerns raised, yes, it is a modern design on the north elevation, but it's considered to complement, as I think I already said, the existing building, which would also then be replicated in the extensions on the west and the east. The glazing would face into the site away from the open countryside, and a condition securing details of external lighting has been recommended. In terms of privacy and child protection, the concerns that have been raised, officers consider that there is sufficient distance between the public right-of-way and the building so as to not require a condition securing obscure glazing. However, councillors may wish to consider whether a condition is necessary during their debate. During the course of the application, obscure glazing has been added to the lower half of the first floor windows in the west elevation, which overlook the sports fields. In terms of parking, no objection has been raised by the Highway Authority. If councillors were minded, the construction method statement condition could be amended to specify phasing of the development. And I'm now going to pass over to Bob, who will discuss technical matters relating to drainage and BREEAM.
Thanks. Thank you. Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to clarify 2 points which have arisen since the publication of the report. So I just want to revise our recommendation verbally slightly. So we did capture it in the updates. We did receive further comments from our drainage engineer regarding the flood risk assessment and the drainage strategy. They still do have concerns, but they are working with the applicant to resolve those. Basically, there is groundwater and surface water issues kind of coming down and covering over this building there. Having spoken to the drainage officer, we will progress those designs, but what we've put in the update report is if members are otherwise satisfied with the proposals, and we're recognising this drainage reasons weren't the reasons why it was called in, then you could choose to, if you approve it, approve subject to delegating this back to us to resolve before issuing a decision. There is also, which has come up today, we've had a further response on the BREEAM matter. So in the package, we are recommending condition for BREEAM excellent. And there's been ongoing debate in the application about whether that is achievable and workable for the proposal. We've received further information today, which because of the committee rules, I can't present to you or have time to analyse, but it is something that I can take away with the environment delivery team and scrutinise. If we were to agree with that position, then instead of a BREEAM condition, we would apply a condition stating if it was demonstrated that it was not practical to apply BREEAM because it's an extension to the building and the stage at which we are in the process, because a lot of the requirements come before, then we would apply an alternative condition to say that basically prior approval of what environmental measures will be provided. So we wanted to still bring it to committee because that wasn't the reasons for the call-in. So if members are happy otherwise with the scheme and want to recommend approval, we would ask that you delegate to us to do so, subject to the resolution of those two technical issues to our satisfaction. Happy to answer any questions on that. That's our revised recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, so we should have Fred Quartermain from Compton via Zoom. Is that correct? Yes, thank you very much for your patience, sir. Well, I'm sure you'll be joining us momentarily. Just say via Zoom here. So there it is. There we go.
Good evening, everyone.
Did you follow the kind of procedure for yourself? 5 minutes, minute warning, 10-second warning, wrap up, that kind of thing?
Absolutely, Chairman.
Okay, so ready to go?
Thank you. My name is Fred Quartermain. I'm a partner at Thring Solicitors. I'm representing Compton Parish Council this evening. It's not in dispute that the current facility is ageing and doesn't meet current requirements, and the principle of the redevelopment of this site is not a contentious issue for the Parish Council. However, we are concerned that the assessment of the development is flawed in a number of ways. The first of those is the use of the site, and to assist members, it's worth setting out the history of the site and its current use. The sports facility at the school has been there for around 40 years. It's council owned, it's built by the council, but it's not solely a school sports hall. Since it opened, the school has had sole use during school hours, but it is a community facility with public access at evenings, weekends, and in the school holidays. Currently, it's open to the public Monday to Thursday, 6 to 10 p.m, and is available for private hire Fridays and weekends. The local archery club use the hall most Friday evenings and every other Saturday morning. There are summer holiday clubs run from the facility. The council has produced its own report which talks about the use of the sports centre, which clearly identifies it as a recognised community use and a community asset. That report says that through the first 11 months of the last year, the centre had 8,088 public attendances. This is predominantly the local clubs, the bowls club, the archery club, the badminton is also mentioned in the council's report, but it includes gym users and individual members of the public. This data demonstrates a small but thriving community facility. Despite this, your officer's report this evening states that the arrangements relating to the use of the facility for community uses are a civil matter outside planning, and that is simply incorrect. Adopted planning policy requires that the potential loss of this facility be considered as part of your decision. That's most clear in the Compton Neighbourhood Plan, which is referenced in the officer's report, but it's a thread that runs through all levels of your planning policy. Ensuring this ongoing community use is a policy requirement and an important material consideration, and the council should be ensuring that that ongoing community use is secured as part of this process, whether that's by a condition or through a planning obligation. And this is an approach the council uses elsewhere in securing community access to development. Failure to recognise and ensure this ongoing community use would almost certainly amount to a failure to comply with the council's public sector equality duty. The council is required to consider whether the potential loss of this community facility through the proposed development would unfairly affect those with protected characteristics. The dismissive approach to the potential loss of the facility in the officer's report is directly at odds with this duty. Turning to noise, residents and parish council remain significantly concerned in relation to the impacts of the new external plant area, and conditions need to be imposed to ensure that there is no harm to amenity caused by this equipment. In terms of design, the parish council strongly feel the design of the building does not respect the site's location in the area of outstanding natural beauty. There are large amounts of glazing. It's been described as a modern design. It's incongruous to the area, and we would submit harmful. And whilst officers are proposing conditions to deal with external light, no consideration appears to be given to the amount of light pollution which will spill from the internal lights during evening and weekend uses as a result of this extensive glazing. The glazing has also led to privacy and safeguarding concerns which
1 minute.
officers have referred to obscure glazing as being a solution to, but that is not secured at this stage, and so the parish doesn't feel are significantly or sufficiently addressed. Finally, the parish feels the application represents a missed opportunity to address ongoing issues around parking for the school, which already cause significant detrimental impact on the amenity of neighbouring residents. This proposal will drive parking away from the school site and onto nearby roads, certainly during the construction phase and most likely for longer periods. Given the design and parking issues raised, the parish believes the application should be refused so it can be refined to deliver better outcomes. However, even if approved, further conditions must be imposed to deal with noise and lighting issues, and the protection of the community use must be ensured. Thank you very much.
Thank you. You had a few seconds to spare there. Members, any questions? Councillor Vickers.
Thank you very much, Mr. Quartermain. Going back to the community use issue, are you suggesting that should be a Section 106 obligation as opposed to a planning condition?
It's not for me to necessarily to advise you on what the best method of securing that is. A planning obligation would be an appropriate way to do that.
Okay, thank you.
Any other member questions? Councillor Ibenhurst.
Thank you, Chairman. Mr. Quartermain, thank you ever so much for your presentation. This will be a question we'll bring up later on, I know, but would you not think it would be in the school's interest to continue and possibly increase community use? There must be some financial benefit to them for doing so.
I am not aware of the contractual arrangements and whether the school benefits at all from the community use, or whether that is outsourced to an external suppliers. Certainly the report the council has produced, which I referred to, suggests that it is outsourced, and that benefit may not be being secured wholly by the school, and indeed whether that is the school or the council that benefits, I'm not clear, but the fact is that there is a existing thriving community use, and the way the application is currently being dealt with does nothing to protect that or ensure its ongoing survival in a way that is within your gift to ensure.
That's great. Thank you very much.
Very much. Any other members? Questions? No. Well, thank you very much for your presentation, and we'll move on. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
So I don't actually have any objectors or supporters down on my list here. And no, I'm going to say no. But we do have, apparently, Thomas Maxwell and Greg Bowman. And I apologise if those are not the names. They are the names. Will you be needing a split, or you can manage it yourselves?
Great to lead the way.
Just do it all. You're taking the heavy lifting. Fair enough. Okay. We're ready?
Ready?
Up you go.
Okay, so good evening, committee. Thank you for hearing this application this evening. My name is Greg Bowman York. I'm the West Berkshire Council Capital Project Delivery Manager at West Berkshire Council. And with me this evening is Thomas Maxwell, the Associate Architect at Oxford Architects. We support this application, which has been brought on behalf of West Berkshire Council's Education Service to extend and refurbish the dilapidated sports hall at the Downs School. This will have the benefits of providing a fit for purpose sports hall meeting DfE design guidelines. Most importantly, this will extend the sports hall from 3 to 4 courts, which puts in line with standard school sports halls elsewhere. This will therefore provide students with excellent modern facilities to encourage sport and engender healthy and active hearts and minds. Also, it will replace a poorly performing building with a refurbished and extended sports hall, which will perform far better in terms of energy sustainability than the current building, and will be net zero in operation. Finally, reworking the efficiency of the car park to provide additional accessible parking. Also, the north car park will be resurfaced and parking denoted, which isn't at the moment. And then both car parks will remain operational during the build, and works will be phased in advance of the construction of the new building. We hope the committee will support the grant of planning permission, and we will be grateful for any queries the committee has.
Oh, okay, thank you. Councillor Barnett.
You mentioned about the phasing. Now, the phasing, presumably, and you can answer this, will have to take place out of school term. Is that correct?
Correct, yes.
Okay, so in regarding a comment regarding the disturbance to trees during the nesting season, will that be conflicting? Because obviously that's a big period when you won't be able to do anything affecting the trees, 1st of March to the end of August.
Correct. Most of the works that we're doing to the car park area shouldn't have impact on the trees. So most of the planning for the tree areas will remain as it currently is on site. So there shouldn't be any issue with summer works taking place to those car parks. The North Car Park is a currently gravelled space. It's going to be taken up, levelled and re-gravelled with correct denoted parking bays, which will hopefully make it a more efficient space for staff and pupils to park in. We can't guarantee it's going to take cars off the road, but it's not going to impact on the existing parking on site.
Councillor Vickers.
Chairman, the speakers haven't mentioned the community use issue, but they're clearly speaking on behalf of the education department, and presumably you've spoken to the school management and the people who manage the facility now. Has the issue of community use come
Sorry,
up at
Councillor
all?
Vickers, if they didn't mention it, we can't question on it, can we?
But they represent the school.
Yeah, but
educational
we're
authorities.
supposed to ask questions on what was presented. I'm quite happy to look to Sharon if I'm wrong, but
Yes, you are, but I don't know if that question, if it were to be answered, would be extremely helpful.
Right, okay, I'm going to let you go
I'm
then. Off you go.
I'm torn because technically you're not, but I think if officers don't know the answer to that, then there's only one other person in the room that does.
okay, please answer the question if you would like.
So, sorry, can you?
Well, the question is, has your discussions in framing this whole project as the project officer, has it involved uses other than the educational uses? And have you taken them into account? We've heard about community use.
So thank you, Councillor Vickers. So the facility provides for the ability for community usage. However, we have no further information at this stage about whether it will be used for community usage.
And it's not part of your brief to ensure that it does.
Correct.
Thank you.
Anthony.
Thank you, Chair. Apologies. Again, I'm kind of deviating. Maybe you can correct me on this one. They've not mentioned about the privacy concerns about the glazing. Should
Then we can ask officers for clarification later.
Okay.
Did they mention that? Oh, I'm sorry. I must have missed that one. Off you go then. So.
Okay. Yeah.
I mean, I thought they did, but maybe I'm wrong. Yeah.
We didn't mention it.
You didn't, then that's so my memory is correct then. So let's move on.
Okay, yeah, I thought they didn't mention, but it was important to ask.
Yeah, well,
them.
we can get the clarification of officers. They should be able to address it. Hello, Wollaston. I believe I saw a hand move. Ah, right. And the one that can't be asked. Anybody else? Any more for any more? No. Okay. Thank you very much, gentlemen.
Thank you very much.
Next, we have the ward member, Councillor Caroline Culver. Have you prepared another speech?
It's just going to become a habit. Right. Thank you, Chairman and members. I called this application in when I was still in my 40s. So 19 months ago. Firstly, let me be positive and welcome the fact that the council wishes to improve the facility. However, the parish council residents and myself do have some concerns. Our highways colleagues in the agenda pack acknowledge that there might be a temporary displacement of sixth formers' cars from the school site to neighbouring streets during the construction, and suggest that less spaces will mean less students drive. With the greatest respect to colleagues in highways, this fails to recognise that this is a rural school where sixth form students come from a very wide catchment, more so than the school children who are younger than that. Only one public school route operates there, the number 6 bus, and it is only every 2 hours. And unless they live in the villages that bus route serves, the bus will be no good to them. If they come from a particularly long way away, they're not entitled to the school transport, so they have to drive. There is already a pressure of parking on neighbouring streets, which the school and myself have received many complaints about. I would strongly recommend to the school that should this receive approval this evening, they work out how to ration spaces so that those who cannot walk, cycle, use public transport, or the school transport system are prioritised for a parking space. So I strongly recommend that. We were told at the site visit that a tree will be lost. The conditions tonight talk about protecting the roots of existing trees, but don't address the loss of that particular tree. So if we could address that, I'd be very grateful to officers. It would be good to have clarity about when this work will take place and how long it will take place. The longest school break of the year, and therefore the prime time when students aren't there, is now coming to an end. The parish council and residents who run the public provision at the school are concerned about public access to the new facility, as you've already heard this evening. While the agenda pack says it is understood that consultation will be held regarding the community use of the facilities, coaches who run some of the public provision right now have told me that they have had no response from the new leisure contractor, Everyone Active, despite raising concerns with them. They were not consulted ahead of the recent tender exercise, and as a consequence, they now have problems they did not have under the previous contractor. I made this call in 19 months ago, as I've mentioned. Why has no reassurance been provided in the meantime to the people who provide sports for the public there? These concerns have been heightened by the apparent lack of interest of the new contractor in engaging with the coaches. And we've heard, with respect to colleagues, we've heard this evening that they don't have any more detail about what's happening there. So saying it's understood that consultation will be held is no good as far as I'm concerned. In February 2022, Compton passed its NDP at referendum. The document states that planning decisions should guard against the unnecessary loss of valued facilities, such as the sports facilities. When the Institute received planning permission shortly after the referendum, policy C2 for the number of houses was not met. Policy C4 district heating was not met. Policy C5 housing mix was not met. Policy C6 hostel retention was not met. Policy C7 regarding house size was not met, and policy C11 about the business hub was not met. Please don't allow policy C12 about community facilities to be ignored as well. The school has experienced flooding on site. School staff showed me a building where students have had to jump across a flooded path to get in and out of a building. And as far as I'm aware, this issue remains unresolved when there's heavy rain. The principal engineer for drainage and flood risk has raised a series of concerns since February 2022. We have seen his emails of February 22, April 22, June 22 and August 23 on the planning portal. So 4 separate contributions he's made. Thank you, Chairman. On the 15th of August, he wrote the flood risk assessment needs to be revised, as you've seen in the updated agenda pack this evening. This is a fundamental problem that he thinks that the FRA needs to be revised. Looking at his emails, I have no confidence that policy CF16 can be met. Why 18 months after his first concerns have we still not got this sorted out so that members can vote with confidence this evening? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Over to members for questions. Oh, there we go. Councillor Benioff.
Thank you, Chairman. This is, bearing in mind what's gone before, probably tenuous. One of the, congratulations on your 50s, by the way. It's,
Thank you.
It's not as bad as all that. And you don't look it.
Thank you.
That's not a planning matter, sorry.
I'm sure it matters to Councillor Colvin. The glazing was one of the reasons for the call-in. And the reason I mentioned that, Chairman, was because that wasn't brought up in your presentation. Has that been resolved for you satisfactorily, or?
I think that Mr. Quartermain made comments about that. I deliberately didn't want to go over all of that again. So I agree with the comments that he made and his existing concerns. Yeah.
Thank you, Councillor Culver.
Thank you. Anybody else? Councillor Holliston.
It just seems to me, and you may say, Chairman, this is not the appropriate time to raise this, but there are so many imponderables which you've raised, which have not been addressed in the report. I just wonder whether we should be looking at a deferral.
We are allowed to defer now. We are after all the speakers have spoken, are we not?
I think what would probably be, I don't know if there's going to be any questions to officers that maybe.
You want to like to do that first, yeah?
I would prefer to do that first and then have some more sort of reasoning in the debate why deferral
Okay,
is the appropriate course.
We'll keep that in mind then, but Councillor Culver, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, everyone.
Oh, sorry, to apologise, Councillor Codling.
No.
Oh, right, you are finished. Okay, Councillor Codling, you have something to say?
Yeah, first of all, I should declare an interest. I should have done this a lot earlier as portfolio holder for education. And I'm obviously aware of this. I have a question of the officers specifically around the glazing. Is it actually necessary at all? If it's going to be well lit from inside with solar panels and it would then cause lighting to spill out, which is one of the areas, it's dark skies, etc. Is it actually necessary?
Okay, thank you. In terms of is it necessary to put the glazing there rather than obscure it?
Yes.
Yeah, fine. That's the proposal in front of us. And we as planning authority must consider what is before us and assess its merits. I suspect it's to do with the amenity of being in that room and having a nice outlook out from the building. I would say the converse to that, the reason we haven't put a condition to secure the obscure glazing is because of the distance to the public right of way, so we don't judge it to be necessary, even though that's been proposed. So I did want to flag that again to members that is not a condition that we've recommended, but they might want to consider depending on their view. Thank you.
Of course, to see out, you'd have to be about 10 foot tall. I don't know if you. Anthony, please.
Thank you, Chair. Again, following up, that was the question exactly what Councillor Codling was asking. Like, just following up on this, Mr. Chair, would the developers consider that obscuring the complete west elevation, considering the current structure has the full obscurement? So why they're not considering it?
So the point I was making there before is we should only put on a planning condition if it's necessary to make the development acceptable. So the concern has been raised, and I understand that during the course of the application, the applicants took it upon themselves to respond to those concerns and offered to obscure glaze it approximately halfway up. Now, as officers, we don't consider that necessary because of the distance involved to the public land, and so we haven't recommended that condition. I understand that I suspect that the applicants would accept a condition if you consider it necessary, but it's not a case of whether they accept it, it's a case of whether you consider it necessary on planning grounds that I think you should focus your debate on. If
indeed. Councillor Vickers.
Separate subject. We've heard a lot about community use, and we've heard a bit about, everyone active being not very engaging. The question is to the legal officer, probably, should we completely discount any contracts there might be between the council and its leisure contractor and really only look at whether the community use can be considered a planning matter, and if so, how we consider it? I think, to my mind, everyone active is just nothing to do with us. That's a separate part of the council.
It isn't, but the community use perhaps, and I think Mr. Dre is best placed to, because I think he's got a potential solution.
Okay,
Chairman. There are matters going on beyond the planning process, clearly, and decisions that are made by the council under different responsibilities, and we're not here to do that. We're here to determine the planning application on its planning merits. The application is presenting you with a proposal to refurbish the sports hall with new facilities. it's not proposing anything that I can see that would take away community use, etc. like that. There's no change of use proposed, for example. If members feel there is need based on the comments, then we have put on conditions in the past to secure details of community use, for example. So that's something you may wish to consider and debate, but that's where we've come from a planning point of view. That's not what the proposal is in front of us.
If I can pursue that, so we could perhaps benefit from your advice as to whether a condition is the right way to deal with the community use, or whether it should be perhaps more firmly tied down through Section 106 legal agreement that the education authority, I suppose, as the applicant, is obliged to make some sort of legal agreement that it remains in public use.
Sharon may want to comment on
we have some advice on that?
legitimacy of entering into a 106 agreement with the council, but as a general planning rule, both conditions and 106s are trying to secure measures in the planning permission, and the MPPF is clear that you should use conditions if possible. You should only resort to Section 106 when a condition would not suffice. I am aware of scheme we've done. I don't see any reason why it would need to be a 106 over a condition.
Anybody else for any more? Yeah, Carol, of course. Sorry, Caroline Culver. You dived under the desk there. I've lost you there for a moment.
Thank you very much indeed, Chairman. Yeah, so officers, could you comment on what Mr. Quartermain said? He said adopted planning policy requires that the potential loss of the facility be considered as part of the decision. So are you saying that that's not true? Because the usage is in the NDP, and as far as I'm aware, this is also to be considered as part of our planning decision-making process, and was approved by an inspector and then by referendum, saying that we should take into account the delivery of these services for local people.
I think the thing is that from a planning point of view, it's not a change of use application. So there is no evidence in the planning application that there's going to be a change of use to stop the community use. And I think that's really where Mr. Dre's comments were coming from earlier.
If there's separate things going on outside of the planning process, then that's for that forum, that decision-making process. There is no change of use proposed in that respect.
You need a supplementary there, or do you need
I'll say something in debate, Chairman? Yeah, thank you.
Okay, sure. Councillor Hooker.
I just wonder whether the officers could bring us up to date with the SUDS situation. We've heard about the flooding, and you've mentioned that there's something going on behind the scenes. Are we going to see something reasonably quick, or a part of this application, or to resolve the issues that's going on at the moment?
Yeah, thank you. As mentioned in my introduction, this came up since the publication of the report. The latest position is to do with the groundwater and the surface water, and the drainage officer is not content with the flood, that the drainage strategy responds sufficiently at this stage. So I've given you the option of how we could proceed if you're content to proceed down that route, and recommend if you were to otherwise approve, you could delegate to that as a technical matter. And in that case, we would be basically making sure that the drainage officer is satisfied with the proposals before proceeding, and we would then know what conditions to apply. If there was any fundamental change to the scheme, then we would bring it back, I suspect, if it changed anything other, beyond the drainage strategy that affects the wider proposal. So it's just a solution we've offered to progress this, given the nature, what the original call-in was based on.
Okay. Being cognizant of the time, everybody, let's try and move into debate unless there's really any more clarification of officers.
No.
Okay, then you're kicking off debate, are you? Okay, off you go.
Yes, Chairman. In the interest of trying to get a decision tonight, and I don't think it's necessary, I hope members agree to have a deferral. I really don't like it. Let me go through what I see as the key issues and suggest how we might proceed. On community use, I would like to accept Mr. Dre's suggestion that we have a condition that requires the the proposals on continuing with community use to be set out, and I'd be happy to leave him to come up with some wording. I do think the parking issue, as Councillor Culver has explained, is a serious one. Maybe a travel plan condition to deal with the. I mean, it's not only the reduction in the available space for parking that might lead us to consider that we have to have some way of rationing the space, the available space, which maybe isn't there at the moment. I mean, after all, we are increasing the footprint of buildings at the expense of the available land for parking. So I think that would be reasonable. In terms of the drainage and the suds, I'm querying, the actual impermeable surface doesn't seem to be increasing significantly. And it sounds from the evidence that Councillor Culver put before us that we're dealing with an existing problem, and he shouldn't be asking an applicant to deal with an existing problem. If there needs to be a new drainage strategy, then is that something that's outside this application? So I would be happy to delegate these whole matters to officers, as Mr. Dreyer suggested, is that wasn't the reason for bringing it to this committee. I'm perfectly happy, frankly, with the glazing. I think to be exercising in a windowless environment is not good for one's mental health when you are surrounded by a pleasant landscape. And I don't think the privacy or the child protection issues are significantly worse than they are in watching the kids running around on the playing field now, with the distance between the public right of way and the first floor, even though it's lit at night. I don't think we can go more than what the applicant has already offered. So that's all I've got to say as a suggestion, a way forward.
Okay, thank you very much. Anybody else? Caroline?
Thank you very much, Chairman. Yeah, just to address Councillor Bicker's point, they're not asking for things to address the existing flooding. The engineer is looking specifically at this application, and the point I made about the existing flooding is to say there is already a problem, and the flooding engineer is saying that this new building needs a new flood risk assessment. So we're actually compounding an issue. So just to be clear to members, I'm not saying that we should punish the applicant because of an existing problem. We should judge the applicant on tonight's proposal, and the flooding engineer says it is not adequate. You will see from the update report, it says the FRA needs to be revised, the drainage strategy needs to factor in likely flooding, provide comments in the drainage strategy on groundwater levels, check whether there are potential issues, etc., etc. And as I mentioned, he has made comments going back to February 2022. Why have these things not been addressed? If these things had been addressed and the issue of usage had been addressed, I think by this point tonight, we could confidently say, great, all sorted, let's go forward. It's a good, positive project. Let's get on with it. So I don't want to come across tonight as someone who's trying to stop something really positive happening. But if I voted for this evening, I would be going against what our flood engineer says. I want to be confident that all of his concerns have been addressed. And I think that the usage is relevant. So we need some sort of, I don't know, advisory or condition or whatever about the public usage. Again, these concerns by the public have been raised, 19 months ago. Would it not have been a good idea for West Berkshire Council as the applicant to have said, do you know what, we need to go and tackle this. We need to sort this out with the public and the parish council to reassure them. Then we can go forward and happily pass the application. But, those things have not happened. So I hope members can understand the frustration and lack of confidence that myself and the parish council have, that the flooding thing has not been addressed, and there's been 19 months to do it, and the usage has not been addressed, and there's been 19 months to do it. It's not as if we raised these concerns last week. It's 19 months ago. Thank you.
Okay, I'm just, if I may join the debate, and then I'll hand back to members in a second. I'm really interested quickly in Caroline's thoughts about whether or not, taking what you've just said into account, whether or not we can delegate that to be resolved by officers. And if you're shaking your head, so that what gives me that answer. So, Councillor Codling, did you want to come in?
Yes, please. Thank you, Chairman. I really do support this. It's absolutely necessary for the school to have this facility. That's the first thing. I did understand that actually it was going to continue in community use. because I thought actually that was part of the thing that the everyone active were pushing for this to be, got on with. So, maybe I misunderstood, and I thought they were going to be offering more facilities by expanding that. But, maybe I've not read the right papers this week. But no, I really want to push on with it.
Okay, so you're more than welcome to make a motion if you wish. Anthony, you wanted to come in?
I'll be very short. Thank you, Chair. Although I would support this proposal or application, I'm concerned about the privacy issues, child protection issues raised by the parish council. And having visited the site, I'm not fully convinced that the length or distance would be sufficient for anyone to not intrude on the public or children there. My only concern or request is if officers or if the applicants would consider putting a full glazing or the covered one, I would be able to support this. Otherwise, it's kind of a red flag.
Unfortunately, we can't redesign the building during a planning meeting. That's not within our remit.
It's a condition that it's there.
Can we condition it?
You could debate it and decide that you wanted to put an obscure glazing.
Because considering the only thing is, I'm not sure why there is a glass window when the current structure is, we've seen it for ourselves, the westward elevation is fully covered. So the new structure or the remodeled one can adopt the same one and completely negate this concern or completely address this concern. So I'm not sure why we are going for a glass when it's the concern for child protection and privacy issues.
Okay, so are we carrying on with debate, or do anybody would like to put a motion forward yet? Caroline? Oh, I do apologise. Caroline just got a finger up just before you. So let's see what she says.
I would like to propose what Councillor Wollaston proposed earlier. I don't know if he's still interested in this proposal, to defer it until we get more clarity about the usage and the drainage.
That's understood. Okay, well, I'll take it up. We're okay to do that at this point. So do I have a seconder for that? I say yes. So all those in favour of deferment while we collect more data on things like have been described as issues this evening, like the community use, the drainage, and some side. Everybody in favour of that, please raise their hands. 1, 2. Everybody against, raise their hands. Those abstaining. Right, I think we're carrying on, I'm afraid. Well, Councillor Hooker was next. Councillor. All right, take us back. So
a condition on half glazing, half obscure glazing. I'm quite happy, but I think there's no how far the footpath. Somebody said people in children that exercise and build right up to the fence of the footpath. So I know it's sort of some issue.
So you are the proposer. So if you wish to propose complete obscure glazing, that's your. You don't, right? Does anybody else want to add that one in?
No, I'd happily second Councillor Hooker. I think the obscure glazing on the lower half is probably necessary because actually not so much from the public footpath, but from much nearer.
You don't need to
there's the
justify
upskirting issue, which I think that would deal with.
So we have a proposer or a seconder. All those in.
Sorry, before.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Just remembered. Would you like to clarify the conditions?
Thank you, Chairman. So, Chairman, I've noted down. As per the officer recommendation, as I described earlier, you mentioned Councillor Vickers's comments earlier, the concern regarding parking and phasing. What I would suggest rather than a travel plan is that we amend condition 5, the construction method statement. Part A says the details of the parking of vehicles and site operatives. We can extend upon that to explain about phasing and timings to make it very clear that that's got to form part of the construction method statement, which I think will.
It's not just the construction method statement, it's the final, finished plan where I think there's going to be a need for the school to somehow ration the use of the parking spaces. And that might involve a travel plan of sorts.
It's construction and operational.
Yeah.
In that case, I would suggest my proposal for the CMS for the construction phase and a separate condition for a plan of how it will be operated operationally, if that makes sense. So I've got that condition there. So that will be a condition 5 amended the construction method statement to cover for the construction phase, a new condition for details, which I would say needs to be with us before occupation as to how the car parking would be operated for the operational phase of the development when it's in use.
And the community use.
And the community use, I would have a condition that says something along the lines of prior to occupation, a scheme of community use should be submitted to the council for approval and thereafter implemented. So between the two of you, so different things, can we just be clear on the proposal for obscure glazing, whether you're including the obscure half of the window? Okay, and second, yeah, thank you.
And sorry, it's also those things that Mr. Dre mentioned earlier about the delegation on the BRIAM and
That's our recommendation, yeah. Yeah.
Sorry, just for my clarity, we did include the SUDs that we are going to wait for the relevant officer.
That's part of the officer recommendation because I amended that at the start.
I just want to be clear.
Yeah.
Mr. Goddard, I saw you raise your hand. Did you need to input at this point?
I did, Chairman. There was a time when every school in West Berkshire Council had a travel plan. I don't know offhand right now what the status is of the travel plan for this school or whether it still exists. The thought that I had was that a travel plan condition was applied, or that the existing travel plan or the existing travel plan was updated to account for this proposal. I also would suggest, as with Mr. Dre, condition 5, I've read some concerns about potential overspilling of car parking onto the nearby highways during construction. Perhaps an additional line needs to be added in there that would ensure that there is staff car parking continuing within the site.
I thoroughly accept your point, but with 3 minutes to go.
Yeah.
Have you finished?
I finished, that'll do.
Right, 3 minutes to go. Where are we at? Councillor Hooker, it was your motion. Are you willing to accept with all those amendments as stated? But excellent. Who was seconded it in the end? Councillor Vickers. All those in favour? All those against? Any abstentions? Right. Wow, that was close. On that point, thank you very much for some very interesting proposals this evening, or planning applications this evening, and for your interest and participation. And we look forward to the next one. That's the end of the meeting. Thank you.